Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. There's something unnerving about a house that doesn't look old, but feels ancient. It was the first thing that struck Clara as she stood before the Vale estate. From the outside, it was pristine. Clean white siding, black shutters, a red door that seemed more decorative than functional. No creaking wood, no chipped paint. But even under the afternoon sun, the place sat under a weight Clara couldn't explain, like the earth itself was holding its breath. The realtor hadn't mentioned anything strange, but Clara knew they wouldn't. 5 bedrooms, 3 baths, a wraparound porch, a cellar that had character, whatever that meant. Yet she'd been drawn to it the moment she saw the listing. Not because it was cheap, though it was disturbingly underpriced, but because something about it reminded her of something she couldn't name. Like a remembered lullaby from childhood. She hadn't told Alex that part. "Don't you think it's weird?" he asked, standing beside her now, suitcase in hand. "This place is too good for the price." Clara forced a laugh. Maybe the owner just needed to leave in a hurry. "You don't think that's worse?" They stepped inside. It was colder than it should have been. Not cold like a bad thermostat, but cold like the walls were hiding something that had bled the warmth from them long ago. Clara shook off the thought. The first night was silent. No creaks, no wind against the windows, just silence. So much of it, it began to feel loud. Clara lay awake, her eyes open in the dark. Beside her, Alex was already asleep, his breathing slow and even. The house, despite being full of space, felt close, tight, as if the walls had crept in after they turned out the lights. She stared at the ceiling until her eyes adjusted. The pattern of shadows from the moonlight filtered through the window blinds. Slowly they shifted. Her breath caught. The shadows moved, not like leaves swaying or curtains fluttering, but with purpose. They twisted across the ceiling like tendrils, curling and reaching. She blinked. They stopped. Just shadows. She rolled over, telling herself she was overtired. But the silence had changed. It wasn't silence anymore. It was listening. Morning came reluctantly. The air smelled different now, musty, like something was rotting inside the walls. Clara dismissed it as old insulation. Houses like this always had secrets. Mold, raccoons, pipes with a mind of their own. The cellar door was at the end of the hallway near the kitchen. She hadn't opened it yet. Neither had Alex. They kept walking past it like it was just a part of the wallpaper. But the door had no lock, no handle, just a hole where a knob should be. Inside, it was pitch black, a darkness that didn't reflect light, even when she shined a flashlight into it the day before. That alone should have been enough to call someone. But Clara hadn't. She wasn't sure why. She made breakfast. The eggs burned. She wasn't distracted, she swore she wasn't. But when she looked down, the yolks were black. Alex appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Smells awful." "I know," she said. "Something's off." They ate in silence. Clara noticed him glancing over her shoulder. Not once or twice, but constantly. Finally, she turned. The cellar door was ajar. She hadn't opened it. She was sure. Her breath caught, but she masked it. "Maybe it's a draft," she said quickly. "Maybe the wood's uneven." "Clara." "What? I thought you said this place didn't have a basement." She blinked. "It doesn't. The realtor said it was a half cellar. Just storage." Alex was pale. "It goes down." "I checked. There are stairs." "That wasn't possible." She walked past that door for the past 2 days. It opened to a small space with boxes. No stairs, no depth. She'd looked. But now the idea was in her head. She needed to see. That evening, when Alex was upstairs, she opened the door again. This time, the dark seemed to ripple. She stepped back. The flashlight in her hand flickered. Then it steadied. Slowly, she pointed it down. Stairs. Wooden, warped, steep. They disappeared into pitch. A smell hit her. Not mildew. not dust, meat. She shut the door. The dream started that night. Clara found herself in the house, but everything was off. The ceilings were too low, the windows too tall. She walked through it barefoot, the wood grain beneath her feet like tiny veins pulsing. She opened the cellar door. No stairs, just a hole. A vertical shaft like a throat. Something breathed inside. When she looked down, it looked back. She couldn't move. A voice whispered, not a voice like a person's, but something older. Gravel and smoke. Come closer. She screamed awake. Alex was sitting up too, staring. You heard it, he said. It wasn't a question. The third day brought the first real crack in their sanity. They'd been arguing over the cellar. Clara wanted to call someone. Alex wanted to leave. We're not thinking straight, he said. We're not sleeping. We're seeing things. Things are happening, she snapped. Eggs don't rot in minutes, Alex. Shadows don't move. He froze. You saw the shadows too. They stared at each other. The air between them buzzing with something neither of them wanted to name. That afternoon, Clara went into town to get some air. The local hardware store was the only place open. She asked the cashier if she knew anything about the Vale house. The woman paused, chewing her gum slowly. That place is still standing, she asked, her voice flat. Yeah, we just moved in. The woman narrowed her eyes. No one's lived there since the Holcomb family. Clara frowned. Who? The woman dropped her voice. They vanished, all 6 of them. House was empty when the sheriff went by. Food still on the table, light still on. One kid was mid-sentence on the answering machine. Clara's stomach twisted. When? About 15 years ago. No one investigated. They did. Sheriff wouldn't talk about it after. Drank himself blind 2 years later. The woman leaned in. They said the walls were bleeding. Clara laughed. It sounded hollow. You're joking. The woman didn't blink. You moved into a place that waited. Some things don't go quiet. They go still. Clara left the store shaking. That night, Alex was gone. Not just in another room. Gone. His clothes were still there. His phone. His wallet. She searched every inch of the house, calling his name until her throat was raw. Then she heard it. The sound of footsteps. But not from upstairs. From below. She turned slowly to face the cellar door. It was wide open. A whisper came, barely louder than her breath. Closer. She stepped forward. 1 foot on the first stair. It groaned, not with her weight, but like it hadn't been touched in decades. Dust swirled, but the air was thick. The smell was worse now, decay and copper. She went down 5 steps before her flashlight died. In the pitch black, she heard a sound she hadn't expected. Alex, crying. Clara, he sobbed. Don't come down, please. Don't. Her breath shook. I have to get you, she whispered. No, he said, suddenly clear. It knows your name now. The light came on suddenly. She was back in her room, in bed, but the cellar door was still open, and carved into the wood was a new word, rough and fresh. Clara. Morning didn't come. It should have been bright. The windows faced east, but the light that filled the room was gray and heavy. She checked her phone. No signal. No date. Just a single message on the screen. He's still down there. Outside, the world felt wrong, too quiet. The birdsong was gone. Trees didn't sway. Wind didn't blow. She walked to the end of the driveway. There was no road, only more trees. And behind her, the house had changed. Now, it looked the way it felt. Old, cracked, faded shutters hanging by rusted nails, paint peeling, vines where none had grown before, and in the upstairs window, someone stood watching her. Not Alex, not her, something else, smiling. She ran, but no matter how far she ran, the house was always behind her. She looped through woods, brush, thorns tearing her skin. And yet, every clearing brought her back to the red door. Waiting, when she finally opened it again, the inside had changed. The floor was gone. Only the stairs remained, down into the dark. Alex's voice called again. But this time, he didn't say her name. He said, "Don't let it wear me." And that's when she understood. The house didn't haunt, it wore people. Their faces, their voices, their lives. It waited silent, listening, learning. Now it had her. And it had a name. The walls remembered her. That's the first thing Clara felt when she stepped back inside. The moment her feet crossed the threshold, the air changed, as if the house had taken a breath, slow and greedy. It was watching. No, listening. She could feel the weight of attention pressing against her skin. Everything about the Vale house had twisted just slightly. The corners were wrong. The angles seemed to lean when she wasn't looking directly at them. The ceiling above the staircase bowed subtly, as if something heavy had once dragged across it and left the structure sagging. The scent of rotting wood was now joined by something deeper, something earthy and metallic, a scent that didn't just sit in the air, it stuck to the inside of her nose. Clara didn't remember walking to the cellar door. One moment she was standing in the hall, and the next, her hand was resting on the wood, fingers gently tracing over the letters of her name. The carving was deeper than it looked. Her fingertips touched splinters where the blade had gone too deep. It hadn't just been written. It had been etched with anger. Or hunger. Behind the door, the dark pulsed again. She couldn't go down. Not yet. Her heart wouldn't let her. And even though every beat of it thudded in her ears like a warning drum, she turned away. She needed answers, not guesses. The woman at the hardware store hadn't lied. Something had happened to the Holcomb family, and Clara was starting to suspect the same thing was happening to her. Upstairs, the rooms were not as they'd been. Where there had once been bright windows and clean walls, now there were long shadows and stains, like fingerprints dragged down drywall. Some of them were low, too low to be adult hands. She paused outside what was once the guest room. Now it was different. She didn't know how, only that it felt wrong, a pressure behind the door, a hum. She reached for the knob. It was already turning. She gasped and stepped back, heart hammering, but the door only creaked open an inch, revealing nothing but darkness. She waited. Nothing moved. No wind. No sound. Just anticipation. Like the house wanted her to look. But she didn't. Not yet. Downstairs again, Clara opened every drawer, every cabinet, searching for a journal, a receipt, anything left behind by previous owners. But the house was impossibly clean. Eerily so. The fridge had no food, the closets no clothes. Yet there were still smells. Lived in smells. Like someone had been there very recently. And then, in the den, tucked behind the wooden paneling of the built-in bookshelves, she found it. A photograph. Old, black and white, faded edges. It showed a family of 6, a man and woman, 3 children, and a 4th figure slightly blurred near the edge. Not a camera blur, not motion. It was smudged, as if someone had tried to wipe the person away with their thumb. Clara stared. The man and woman were smiling stiffly. The children all looked different ways, as if no one had said cheese. But the 4th figure, its head was turned completely toward the camera, eyes black, no mouth. Her hand shook as she flipped it over. On the back, in elegant handwriting, Holcomb, 1984. We see you too. She dropped it. The sound it made hitting the ground was wrong, wet somehow. She didn't pick it up. Clara knew she had to leave. Forget Alex, forget the house. Just run. She reached for her car keys in the kitchen drawer where she always left them. Gone. She tore through every drawer, every counter. Nothing. Her phone still had no signal. The front door, when she tried to open it, refused. It stuck like it had fused with the frame. She pulled harder. It didn't budge. That's when she noticed the hallway lights were off. Every single bulb. The cellar door was open again. Not wide. Just a crack. Enough for her to see the dark. Enough for her to hear it breathing. And then, something stepped out. She didn't see it, not fully. Just the shape of it. Like a man, but taller than the frame. Shoulders that brushed either side of the doorway. Movement slow and deliberate. Her breath hitched as it stepped into the hallway. She backed away, inch by inch, too afraid to blink. Its head turned to her. but it had no face. Only skin, stretched tight and too smooth. "Clara," it said in a voice that wasn't spoken but still heard. "Come see what he's become." She turned and ran. Up the stairs, 2 steps at a time, heart beating out of rhythm. The walls leaned inward as she passed, narrowing. Her room was the only place that still felt untouched. She slammed the door shut behind her, pressed her back to it, and locked it. The thing outside didn't try to follow, not yet. She looked to the bed. Alex was lying there, his back to her. She rushed to him, hands grabbing his shoulder, turning him over. But it wasn't Alex. Not anymore. His eyes were gone, mouth sewn shut with thick black thread, skin sagging as if it had been drained of whatever made it him. His chest rose and fell, barely, but when his eyes opened, even though there were no pupils, they focused directly on Clara. A whisper, ragged and sharp, leaked through the stitches. "Don't let it wear me." She stumbled back. The door behind her creaked. When she turned, the lights went out. All of them, even the hallway. In the dark, the whispering began again, louder now, from every wall, every floorboard. Dozens of voices overlapping, none familiar. Names were whispered, names she didn't know, names that weren't hers. Until, "Clara," the many voices said, together this time. "We have your face now." And then, silence. She screamed. No one answered. She was alone, except she wasn't. A mirror in the corner lit up suddenly. It had never been there before. But in it, she didn't see herself. She saw the 4th figure from the photograph. Closer now, its eyes wide and endless, its hands resting gently on Alex's chest. It smiled. Where there had been no mouth before, now there was a perfect copy of hers, and it said, "Come home." Then the mirror went black. She ran to it, tried to smash it, but the glass wouldn't break. It pulsed like skin, warm, breathing. Behind her, the closet door opened. Inside, stairs, going down, and deeper than the house should allow. And from the shadows at the bottom, she heard Alex's voice again. Only this time. It said, "You've already come too far." The stairs behind the closet were impossibly long. Clara stared into the void, heart pounding, palms slick with sweat. They spiraled down into something that shouldn't exist. Space that couldn't physically fit beneath the house. It was like standing at the edge of a hole that had been cut into the world itself. The air above it, slightly colder, slightly wrong. It smelled of wet stone and time, ancient time. The kind that didn't belong in a modern home, but in crypts buried beneath forgotten cities. She didn't want to descend. Every part of her screamed to turn away. But Alex's voice echoed again, soft and brittle, drifting up from the dark like it was falling apart. "Help me." Her hand tightened on the frame of the doorway. She couldn't tell if what called to her was truly Alex, or just something wearing his sound. But if there was even a chance, even the smallest thread of truth behind the voice, she had to follow. Her legs moved before her mind could protest. With each step, the air grew thicker. The walls, stone now instead of wood, wept cold moisture. The sound of dripping water echoed endlessly. She counted her steps. 37, 50, 82. She should have reached a basement by now. But still the stairs curled deeper. On the 105th step, she saw it, a smear on the wall. Red. Old, but not dry. She didn't touch it, but she didn't need to. The smell was enough. It was blood, fresh enough to cling. Just ahead, the shadows twisted, and the narrow walls widened into a room. At first glance, it looked like a chapel. A crude stone altar stood at the center, surrounded by dozens of small wooden chairs. Children's chairs, Clara realized. All of them turned inward, facing the altar, facing the thing that sat on top of it. A doll. No, not a doll. It was too lifelike. A figure crafted from wax and bone, stitched together with hair and something darker. Its eyes were marbles, one cracked straight through. Its mouth hung open, packed with dirt. Around it, symbols were carved into the stone in a language Clara couldn't read. But she could feel them. They vibrated in her teeth. As she moved closer, one of the chairs creaked. She froze. Another creak, then another. She turned slowly, and in that moment, her breath left her chest entirely. The chairs were no longer empty. Figures sat in them, small, hunched, children, but not quite. Their skin was gray and sunken. Their eyes were pinpricks of light, no irises. Their mouths hung open, as if they were caught in the middle of a scream that never ended. They didn't move like people. They didn't look at her, but they felt her. Their heads twitched slightly in her direction. One reached out a hand, fingers far too long, scraping against the stone floor with a dry rasp. Clara backed away. A sound behind her. The wax figure on the altar twitched. A sharp cracking sound followed as it jerked upright, its mouth snapping shut. The dirt spilled out in clumps, revealing something that glinted. Metal. A key. Clara didn't move toward it, not immediately. The children, things sat still, watching without eyes, waiting. She swallowed hard, then lunged. The moment her hand wrapped around the cold metal, a high, pitched ringing exploded through the room. Not from the doll. From everything. The walls. The ceiling. The altar. A frequency that made her teeth hurt and her knees buckle. The children screamed, not with sound, but through the sudden widening of their mouths, their jawbones unhinging to grotesque proportions. The lights above flickered. Torches now, not bulbs, and extinguished. Clara didn't wait. She ran. The stairs weren't behind the closet anymore. They continued downward, deeper. The air grew heavier, wet and sour. She could still hear the ring in her skull, even though it had stopped, her ears blood. Down. Down. She reached a hallway lit by swaying yellow bulbs that buzzed and hummed. Doors lined the narrow corridor, dozens of them. Each one different. Some rotted wood, others iron, bound, some simple modern panels, like any you'd find in a suburban home. Names were scratched into each in frantic, jagged handwriting. She passed one that read JLITLQOMB, another BNWLQMB. She stopped in front of the third LEXRE'd. Her breath hitched. She pressed her ear to the door. Silence. Then, scraping. Like fingernails against the inside, and a whisper. Don't trust her face. She stepped back. The lock on the door was old, brass, simple. She reached into her pocket, her fingers curling around the cold iron key. Before she could slide it in, she heard a click behind her. Another door had opened. Slowly, she turned. At the far end of the hallway, a figure stood in the open frame. Tall, thin, wearing Clara's face, not perfectly. There were cracks around the eyes, a seam just below the chin. The thing smiled wide, too wide, and in her voice it said, "I was so tired of pretending to be you." Clara stumbled back, fumbled with the key. Her fingers slipped. The imposter took a step forward, bare feet slapping against the stone. Another step. Closer. Its eyes never blinked. "I got to know your heartbeat," it whispered. I liked it. It felt like a song. The key finally slid in. Clara turned it and threw open the door. Inside, Alex, alive, sort of. He was strapped to a chair, gaunt, eyes hollow. His lips were torn from screaming, but his gaze locked on hers instantly. "Clara," he croaked. The imposter's footsteps were closer now. She ran to Alex, tried to untie the ropes. They were soaked, sticky. She didn't ask with what. He winced but didn't scream. Behind her, the door slammed shut. The room dimmed. The only light now came from above, a single bulb flickering madly. Then, from behind the door, a voice, her voice. "Again, you were too easy. He believed you first." Alex groaned. "It wore you for weeks. Said you were sick. Said you needed time. But you were already gone. I knew when you stopped humming in the morning. You always hum." Tears filled Clara's eyes. "I'm here now. It's me." "I know," he whispered. "She hates that." Suddenly, the walls of the room shuddered. Dust rained down from above. The bulbs swung wildly, and the thing outside screamed, not in rage, in frustration. "You're not done yet," it howled. "You belong here." Alex's ropes came loose. They ran. Back into the hallway. But now it was different. Longer. The doors multiplied with every step. The lights above exploded one by one behind them. And from the dark, The voice continued, soothing now. Cruel. Run, run, run. It only makes your fear taste better. Clara didn't look back. Neither did Alex. At the end of the corridor stood another door. Iron. No name on it, just a symbol. A circle within a triangle. A slit in the center like an eye. Alex hesitated. Clara grabbed his hand. They opened it together. What lay beyond wasn't freedom. It was another house. The same house, but different. Darker, colder, waiting. The door shut behind them on its own, and from the kitchen, something began to hum. Her tune, wrong notes, broken rhythm. But it was hers, and it was coming closer. The humming didn't stop. It threaded through the silence like a blade through skin. Off-key, yet unmistakably hers. Clara froze. Alex gripped her arm so tightly it hurt, but neither of them moved. Not at first. The tune twisted through the air, circling them, echoing off walls that weren't the same as before. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet, even though they weren't moving, and the ceiling above them groaned like something heavy was dragging across it. This wasn't the same house they had walked into days ago. The shape was similar. The layout seemed familiar, but it was wrong in a way Clara couldn't explain. The hallways had too many turns. The rooms too many corners. Corners where shadows gathered and didn't leave. The walls felt closer, thicker, like they were breathing, swelling slightly in and out. The door behind them was gone, not closed, gone. Where it had been now stood a smooth wall, the same faded wallpaper stretching unbroken. Clara backed up until her spine touched it, just to feel something real. Alex was pacing now, running his fingers through his matted hair, muttering, "We left. We left. We opened a door. We didn't leave," Clara said quietly. "We just stepped into its next layer." She didn't know why she said it like that, but she knew it was true. The house wasn't a building. It was a trap, a maze. It had doors that opened to memories, to lies, to echoes of other lives it had swallowed. And now it had them again. A noise came from the kitchen, a soft, deliberate tap. Then another, footsteps, slow and rhythmic. Clara didn't move. She knew what was coming. The way you know lightning's about to follow thunder. The way you know a scream is about to pierce the silence after the power goes out. Something was coming down the hallway. The humming grew louder. Still her tune, still broken. And then she saw it. At the end of the corridor, stepping through the flickering light, came her. Not her. The imposter wearing her skin. But now, the disguise had started to break. The edges of the face sagged. The eyes were uneven. The mouth was too wide. One arm hung longer than the other, bones warping beneath the flesh like the form inside couldn't hold the costume steady anymore. It smiled. "You left the door open, Clara." That was rude. Clara reached for Alex's hand and yanked him down the nearest hallway. The floor under them felt softer, like something hollow just beneath it was shifting. They ran past doors that had no handles, paintings that twisted as they passed, portraits with faces that moved, blinked, sneered. One painting reached out with a blackened hand and scraped claws across Clara's shoulder as she passed. She screamed, stumbled, but didn't stop. They burst into a room that might have once been a study. Bookshelves lined every wall, but the books were rotten, pages pulped with damp, and the titles had been scratched out. In the middle of the room sat a desk with a single object on it, a tape recorder. It was already playing. They heard a voice. Old, broken male. "This is the 12th recording. I don't know what day it is anymore. I stopped counting when I realized the house rewrites time. You sleep, you wake, it's not the next day. It's a different day. A different year. I've seen things. People who weren't people. They wear your face. They feed on memory. And if you start forgetting, they fill in the blanks with themselves." The voice coughed violently. "I'm leaving this for anyone who finds it. Don't talk to them. Don't believe them. If you see yourself in the mirror and your eyes blink a half second too late, run." The tape clicked off. Alex turned to Clara. "That's what it's doing, isn't it?" making us doubt, trying to replace you. She nodded slowly. I think it already tried. They couldn't stay there. The shadows at the edges of the room were moving again, coiling up the shelves, dripping down like oil from the ceiling. They ducked through another hallway, but the floor groaned differently here, deeper. They ran across a long dining room where a feast had been laid out, but the food was rotten, bubbling with insects. Every chair was occupied by people with no faces, their skin sagging where their eyes and mouths should be. One of them slowly raised a hand in greeting as Clara and Alex passed, tilting its head too far to one side. Upstairs. They had to get upstairs. The old Clara, the one who hadn't been hunted through an impossible house, might have questioned why. But the Clara who had watched her own face speak with a stranger's voice didn't hesitate anymore. They needed high ground. The staircase at the far end of the hall stretched impossibly tall, more floors than the house should have. They climbed, feet echoing, each step seeming longer than the last. The second floor was darker. The lights flickered constantly. Shadows flickered across the walls, but not their own. At the top of the stairs was a mirror. Clara stopped. She stared at it. Her reflection stared back, but it didn't move when she did. She raised her right hand. The reflection lifted its left. She stepped closer. So did it. Face to face now. Glass between them. The reflection smiled. Clara didn't. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the iron key, the same one from the wax figure's mouth. She pressed it against the mirror. The reflection blinked, then bared its teeth. The glass cracked. Alex grabbed her arm. Don't look anymore. They pushed past. The hallway here bent unnaturally. At one point, the ceiling dipped so low they had to crouch. A child's mobile dangled from it, gently spinning. Its ornaments were teeth, wired together by hair. Clara brushed past it, shivering. At the end of the hallway was a door. A real one. Wooden, rotting. Handle intact. She didn't think. She opened it. Inside was a nursery. But not their nursery. Not anyone's nursery. The crib was made of bones. The walls were covered in pages. Journal entries, drawings, all scrawled by children's hands. Phrases repeated again and again. She walks backwards at night. Don't eat what it gives you. If you forget your name, it becomes you. Then, at the center of the room, something stirred. A child, small, sitting on the floor, crying. Claret knelt down slowly. Hey, are you okay? The child looked up. It was her. Young Clara. The girl looked no older than 8. Same eyes. Same scar on the chin from the bike crash. She stared at adult Clara with wide, wet eyes. You left me, the little girl said. No, Clara whispered, throat tight. I didn't know. I didn't remember. The child's eyes changed. Black now. The voice deepened, split, cracked. You never remember. That's why it always wins. The child's mouth split open, far wider than human, and began to scream. Clara fell back. Alex grabbed her, yanked her out the door. The hallway had changed again. Now it led to only one place, the cellar door. Back where it all began. Carved into it now, fresh and red, Clara was here. Clara is gone. We wear her well. And beneath it the hum began again. Only now it was Alex's voice singing. Clara stared at the cellar door, heart thundering like it was trying to outrun her chest. The red carving blood into the wood, the words seeming to pulse. Clara was here. Clara is gone. We wear her well. Her throat felt raw. Not from screaming, not yet, but from holding it back. From swallowing the urge to collapse. Behind her, Alex had gone quiet. Too quiet. She turned to him. He was staring straight ahead, face blank. His lips moved, soundless at first, then quietly, as if he were humming. No, not humming, mouthing her lullaby. But the tune was wrong. Like a tape recording played a fraction too slow. Alex, she whispered. He didn't respond. His eyes were glossy, like fogged glass, and for a single, terrifying moment, she wasn't sure he was in there anymore. She gripped his shoulders, shook him slightly. Alex, snap out of it. He blinked, once, slow, and then he spoke. But it wasn't his voice. Clara, it said, he's deeper than you think. worn thin, still warm, but fraying. She yanked her hands away. The skin beneath her fingers was wet. Not sweat, not blood, oil, thick and black. She stepped back. Alex's head lolled slightly, like a marionette whose strings had been tugged too hard. He smiled then. Wide. Too wide. Not like the thing that wore her, but worse. Because this time, it knew what she feared, and it was using his face to say it. Why do you keep fighting? It crooned. You think you're the first. You think the house doesn't remember the ones who scream and run and cry and beg. They all run out of stairs eventually. Clara clenched her fists. Where is he? The thing tilted its head. He's still here. Somewhere. But I'm wearing the top layer now, like a favorite coat. The lights above them flickered again, humming louder, and in that flicker, just for a breath, Alex's face changed. A hollowed skull, mouth gaping in a silent scream, pressed against the inside of his skin like it was trying to claw its way back to the surface. She ran. Not back to the nursery. Not down the hallway with the mirror. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to move. The walls pulsed as she passed, seams in the wallpaper stretching like skin over muscle. Doors blurred past her, some open, showing glimpses of things that couldn't be real. A dining room where the plates breathed. A bedroom with 3 beds, each one full of children with her face. A bathroom mirror where her reflection moved before she did. She stumbled into a room that hadn't been there yesterday. It looked like a hospital ward. Cold tile, steel-framed beds, ivy poles hanging bags of something dark, machines beeping in irregular rhythms. The windows showed nothing, just blank walls. No sky, no outside. A single lamp swung above her, casting light in slow, dizzy circles. In the farthest bed, something moved under the sheet. She almost turned away, but it whispered. Clara. The voice was ragged, weak, real. She stepped forward, dread heavy in her legs. With each step, the room seemed to lengthen. The ceiling climbed higher. The light grew dimmer. She reached the bed, pulled back the sheet. Alex. Not the twisted version, not the thing pretending. Him, gaunt, pale, lips cracked, hands trembling. His eyes fluttered open. I didn't know if you'd find me, he whispered. Clara knelt beside him, fighting tears. I thought I lost you. You did, he said. We both did. I don't understand. How are you here and out there? His fingers clutched hers. Cold as ice. The house doesn't take you all at once, he murmured. It peels layers. Pieces. It lets you see yourself in it until you don't remember what's you anymore. Then how do we leave? Alex laughed. It was the saddest sound she'd ever heard. You don't. No one leaves. They just forget they were trying to. The lamp above them sparked violently. The room shrieked. No other word for it. A metallic wail that came from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The sheet beneath Alex began to burn away, slow at first, revealing raw red muscle beneath his skin. He screamed. Clara grabbed him, pulled hard, but his body began to sink into the bed, like it was swallowing him whole. Clara, he choked, you have to burn it. What? The heart, it's deeper. Under the stairs. In the room with too many doors. The one you can't look at directly. His eyes rolled back. Then his mouth stretched open, wider and wider, and a hand pushed through his lips, her hand. Fingers first, then an arm. Clara screamed as the imposter began pulling itself from within him, like a snake shedding skin. She fled. Back through the hallway. Back down the warped stairs that twisted like intestines. The house pulsed around her now. Walls breathing, floors twitching. Whispers followed her, climbing into her ears no matter how fast she ran. You're mine. Mine. Clara, she stopped when she saw it. A new door. Wooden, ancient, with a brass handle shaped like a spine. No frame. Just wall, and then suddenly, not. The door wasn't there yesterday, but she didn't hesitate. She opened it. Inside pitch black, but not empty. She stepped in. The door closed behind her, and the dark whispered, closer. The door shut behind Clara with a finality that stole the breath from her lungs. No latch, no slam, just the sound of being sealed in, like air being vacuumed out of existence. She reached for the handle without thinking, hand trembling, but her fingers met only cold, unbroken wall. The door was gone, already swallowed by the space behind her. She stood frozen, heart beating so loudly she could feel it in her teeth, surrounded by a darkness that wasn't just empty, it was aware, watching, breathing. She tried to focus. There had to be something, a wall, a floor, a direction. But the dark here didn't play fair. It warped her sense of space, flattened her depth, stole her sense of time. Her breathing was the only sound she could count on, and even that felt like it belonged to someone else. The air was heavy, thick with damp and dust, and the copper tang of something far too close to blood. She reached out blindly, fingers twitching in the dark, and took a cautious step forward. The ground beneath her foot felt soft, not carpet, not earth, flesh, warm and slightly yielding. Like the body of something vast and asleep, she froze, stomach clenching. Then something moved beneath her soul, and she stumbled back, heart lurching. The dry scrape of her breath the only proof she hadn't screamed. Not yet. Then the whispers began again. They came from all sides. Low, crawling tones that rose like steam from the ground, brushing against her ankles, slipping past her ears. Some murmured names. Hers, Alex's, names she didn't know but felt like she should. Others asked questions she couldn't answer. Do you remember when you forgot? Which face is yours now? What color were your mother's eyes? Clara tried to ignore them. She pressed forward into the dark, moving in what she hoped was a straight line, dragging her fingers along the unseen surface beside her. It pulsed gently under her hand, like it had a heartbeat of its own. She didn't know how long she walked. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. Her legs ached, and her breath began to shake with the effort of holding it steady. Still the dark went on. No walls, no end, then light. Not warm, not welcoming. Cold, flickering. A single hanging bulb in the distance, swaying without wind, casting a sickly yellow glow on what lay beneath it. A door. But not like the others. This one was alive. It breathed. Its surface was made of skin. Stitched panels of it, different shades and textures, pulled tight and bound with black, rusted wire. Veins pulsed beneath the surface, some thick and ropey, others twitching in rapid spasms. In the center was an eye, human, green, blinking slowly. Clara's stomach turned as the pupil tracked her movements, unblinking, conscious. Something behind the door moaned. Not loud, not angry. Tired Clara approached, nausea rising. She didn't want to touch the handle. It was a jawbone, fastened to the door with sinew, but her hand moved anyway, trembling. The moment she made contact, the eye rolled back. The skin flexed, drawing taut. The door opened on its own. What lay beyond was not a room, it was a throat. Wet, ribbed walls pulsed inwards. A tunnel of meat. Flesh glistened in the flickering light, contracting slightly as she stepped inside. Behind her, the door sealed shut with a wet snap. She tried not to scream. She moved forward, feet slapping against the slick, living floor. Every step was answered by the low thump of something massive, deep below, a heartbeat, the house's heartbeat. She was inside it now. Not the structure, the thing. Alex's words came back to her, burn the heart, and suddenly she knew where she was going. The heartbeat grew louder with every step, echoing off the walls. She followed it through the living tunnel, past bone, pillar supports, past twitching growths that spat black ichor as she passed. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The further she went, the more the space shifted around her, like the thing was guiding her, or worse, testing her. Then she saw it. The room opened suddenly. A cavernous chamber of throbbing tissue and bone. At its center sat something immense. The heart. It wasn't shaped like a human heart. It was wrong. A mass of meat and pulsing arteries as tall as a man, suspended by tendrils that reached into the ceiling, floor, walls. Black veins pumped viscous liquid through the room, feeding it, keeping it alive. The heart convulsed with every beat, slick and terrible. Clara stepped closer, shielding her mouth from the stench. The floor here was slick with blood and rot. Bones floated in small puddles of it, child-sized. She tried not to look. She had one chance. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the only thing she had left, the iron key. The one that had opened Alex's cell. The one that had come from the wax doll's mouth. She held it up, and the heart reacted. It shrieked. A sound like 1,000 voices screaming from deep inside the walls. The chamber trembled. The tendrils recoiled. Clara didn't wait. She ran to the heart and plunged the key deep into its side. The reaction was instant. The walls convulsed. The heart blotted thick, dark syrup. Screams poured from every direction. The tunnel behind her collapsed in a rush of meat and cracking bone, and the voices began screaming her name.
Silar! Silar! You're ready too!
The ceiling cracked open and something began crawling down. A shape, humanoid, but massive, made of writhing limbs and stolen faces. Hers among them. It dropped to the floor with a wet thud, rising slowly. The last of the flesh was burning now. The walls cracked. The house screamed, not through the floor or ceiling, but from inside her head. It wanted her gone, but it wouldn't let her go. Clara turned. There was a doorway, new. A small wooden frame untouched by rot or flesh, and beyond it, sunlight, actual sunlight. She ran. Behind her, the heart exploded in a cascade of black filth. The shape screamed. The tendrils lashed toward her, grasping. She dove through the door and hit the ground outside. Grass, dirt, wind. Real. She lay there gasping, chest heaving, the scream of the house echoing once, then vanishing. When she sat up, the Vale house was gone. No wreckage, no foundation, just a field, empty. And beside her, in the grass, lay a single object, the iron key, still wet, still warm, and carved into the blade 3 new words, not the end. The sky above Clara was a pale, disinterested blue, washed out, almost fake, as if the world was trying too hard to seem normal after everything. She sat in the grass for what felt like an hour, unable to decide if she was shaking from exhaustion or terror, or if they were now the same thing. Her hands were slick with blood that wasn't hers. Her boots were soaked in the black ichor of something that didn't belong to any living thing, and in her palm, the iron key remained, heavier now, colder, like it had been watching too. The Vale house was gone, not destroyed, not collapsed, gone. No debris, no foundation, not even the trace scent of rot that had hung in the air since they moved in. It was as if it had been surgically removed from reality, excised cleanly and quietly by something that didn't want to be followed. And yet, Clara knew it wasn't over, not because of some gut feeling, not because she saw ghosts in the clouds, because the ground beneath her still pulsed, just barely, like something vast and buried was holding its breath. She stood, legs aching, and turned in a slow circle. Open field. No road. No path. Trees lined the distance, but they were too still, their branches motionless even in the wind. The silence here wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. Then she heard it. A voice. Not whispering now. A child's voice, singing. The same lullaby she had heard 100 times. Hers. Only this time it was sung in perfect pitch. Too perfect. Clara spun toward the sound. There, maybe 50 yards away, stood a figure. Small, a girl. Her back was turned, standing barefoot in the grass, head tilted up toward the sky. Her dress was white and stained at the hem, her hair matted in strands down her back. Clara didn't call out. She just knew. This wasn't some lost child. It was another piece of the house, still clinging to her, testing her, mocking her. She walked forward, slow and steady. Iron key clenched tight in her fist. The girl didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even breathe. Clara stopped a few feet behind her. The air here felt heavier, the wind colder. The girl's shoulders twitched, then stilled. And she spoke, in a voice that echoed without volume. You opened the door. Clara didn't respond. You gave it your name, the girl continued. That's the first way in. I burned the heart, Clara said quietly. The girl laughed, not cruelly, not innocently, just empty. You burned a heart, she said. Not the heart. Clara's stomach dropped. She opened her mouth to ask, but the girl turned then, and the words caught in her throat. It was her? Young. 8, maybe 9. But her eyes, those weren't Clara's eyes. They were made of glass, not metaphorically. Literally. 2 shining marbles, blue and polished, stared back at her from a face that looked sculpted from wax. The girl stepped forward. Do you know what the house is? She asked. Clara backed up, slowly. It's not cursed, the girl continued. It's not haunted, it's hungry. And it's not in one place, it wears places, like skin, towns, fields, churches, schools. It waits until someone opens the door in just the right way. Clara's mouth felt dry. So what do I do? Run forever. The girl smiled. There's no forever left, she said. It remembers too much now. It's learned how to follow. Then her mouth twitched. Her voice shifted. Deeper now. Older. You can't kill something that remembers being everything. The girl took another step. Clara raised the key, not knowing what she meant to do with it. Threaten. Defend. It didn't matter. The girl didn't stop. Then, with no warning, she collapsed. Her body hit the ground like a puppet dropped from strings. Flat. Unmoving. But Clara didn't feel relief. Because something crawled out of her mouth. A hand. Thin. Long-fingered. Followed by an arm. Then a shoulder. Then the same thing she had seen before in the heart room began peeling itself free. Skin stretching, bones cracking, as it wore the girl's body like a cocoon. Clara turned and ran. The field shifted under her feet. The grass grew taller, then shorter. The ground cracked open in places with jagged fissures, and from each one, whispers slithered up like steam from hell. She tripped once, caught herself, pushed on. She didn't know where she was running to, only that behind her was something that remembered her too well. Then, buildings. Not modern ones. Ruins. Crumbling brick walls, toppled steeples, shattered windows. An abandoned town. Clara ducked into the first doorway she saw. Inside dust, rot, silence. She slammed the door shut and leaned against it, gasping. Her hand ached from clenching the key. She dropped it. It hit the floor with a metallic thud that echoed too loud, too long. Then something moved. She wasn't alone. In the corner, near the broken window, a man sat with his back to her. Pale skin, no shirt, hair gray and wild. He didn't react to her presence, just stared out the window, unmoving. Clara stepped forward slowly. Hello, she whispered. The man didn't move. She stepped closer, and he spoke. I see it now. Clara froze. The voice was cracked, dry, but familiar. The man turned his head slightly. It was Alex, or what was left of him. His eyes were bloodshot, sunken, but he smiled when he saw her. You found me again, he said. Clara dropped to her knees beside him. What happened? I pulled you out. I saw you. He shook his head. You pulled out what it let you. I was never whole again. She looked at him, really looked. Parts of his skin had been stitched, not healed, sewn, as if something had tried to put him back together after taking him apart. Is it gone? She asked. No, Alex whispered. It's here, in the space between, wearing this town now. This place used to be real. People lived here, but it fed, it swallowed. He pointed out the window. Clara followed his finger and saw them, people. Dozens of them wandering the empty streets. Except, they weren't people anymore. They had no faces. Only blank, stretched skin where features should be. And each wore a different piece of someone else. An arm too long, a neck too thin. Limbs stolen from the house's memory. They're called the Hollow. Alex murmured. What's left of those it tried to be? Clara stared in horror. Can we stop it? Alex's smile faded. I think it's already trying to be you. Then the door behind her groaned. Clara turned. A figure stood in the doorway. Her height. Her shape. And when it stepped forward, it had Alex's face. Clara didn't move. She couldn't. Her legs locked, breath shallow. Skin prickling with the sharp edge of horror that numbed rather than panicked. The thing standing in the doorway wore Alex's face perfectly. Not distorted like the others, not exaggerated or stitched together. It was him. Down to the mole on his jaw. The faint scar above his left eyebrow. But the eyes, that was where it cracked. They were too wide, too aware, too new. It smiled, gently, lovingly. "Clara," it said in Alex's voice, stepping inside. "You look tired," she flinched. Behind her, the real Alex didn't speak. He was staring at it, not with fear, but with resignation. He'd seen this before. Clara stood slowly. "You're not him." The thing tilted its head, amused. "But I could be. You let me in once. Do you remember?" She didn't reply. It walked further into the ruined room, feet barely making a sound on the dust-laced floorboards. It glanced down at the discarded iron key and paused. "That won't help you anymore. That key was only ever meant to open you." It looked back up at her, smile fading. "You think you burned the heart, but you didn't. You found one of its chambers. The house doesn't have a heart, Clara. It is the heart. Every wall, every door, every whisper, it beats through you now. You think you've escaped, but you never left. You're just in a quieter part. Behind it, outside the window, the faceless things, the hollow, had stopped wandering. They were staring, all at once, toward the building, toward her. Their heads tilted in perfect sync, like flowers tracking the sun. Clara backed away until her heel touched the real Alex's knee. He looked up at her. "You need to go," he whispered. "It's not done with you, but it's distracted." "I'm not leaving you again," she said, voice shaking. "You already did. You just don't remember. It's better that way." The imposter Alex stepped closer. "Listen to him," it said gently. "He's telling the truth. You forget more every time. It's easier. That's what the hollow are. What's left after the house eats all your details." Clara turned to him again. "Is that what happened to you?" He smiled sadly. "No. I remembered too much." The floorboards shuddered suddenly beneath their feet. A sound like cracking ice echoed through the building, then a low, drawn-out moan that came not from outside, but from beneath. The structure itself was groaning, shifting. "Time's folding," the thing said, now watching the walls. "The house is ready for its next shape. This one's old. Worn out." Clara turned back toward it. "Why me?" It blinked slowly. "Because you opened the door." A sudden jolt knocked her off her feet, the ground lurching sideways like a wave had hit the building. From the corner, dust rained down. The walls began to breathe again. It was starting. The shift. Alex grabbed her arm. "Go north, into the forest. There's another door. One they forgot to close." Clara stared at him. "How do you know that?" "Because I saw it open. A long time ago, before I forgot what it was for." The building cracked loudly, a deep splintering that shook her bones. Behind the imposter, the hollow began to move, fast, toward the house, their jerky gaits now eerily fluid. The thing that wore Alex's face looked back and sighed. "They're coming for you. They need your truths. You're still fresh." Clara scooped up the key and ran. The door exploded open behind her, and she sprinted down the cracked steps into the street. The hollow followed immediately, legs scissoring unnaturally, feet dragging but impossibly fast. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Every window she passed had someone watching her. Not faces, just the shape of people. Heads pressed to cracked glass, hands dragging slow lines across the panes as she raced past. The air turned colder. The buildings began to distort, slanting, stretching. Bricks melted. Wood grew like roots, curling into strange symbols as she passed. The town was becoming unreal, folding in on itself like paper in a fire. Then she saw it. A clearing beyond the town, a break in the impossible, and at its center, a frame. Not a door, but a doorway, standing alone. Its wood splintered but solid. No walls, no roof, just a threshold. Like someone had once meant to build something and stopped halfway. She bolted for it. The ground buckled beneath her feet. Black veins ruptured from the soil. The hollow shrieked behind her, their voices finally breaking the silence. It wasn't words, it was wanting. They screamed with hunger. Clara reached the threshold just as something grabbed her ankle. Cold, sharp, she kicked, screamed, and fell forward through the frame, into nothing. Not darkness, not light, just absence. No ground, no time, no sound. Just floating in a void that felt like the pause between two nightmares. And then, a voice, soft, old. We remember you. Dozens of voices now. Hundreds. We wore you once. You liked it. You looked better on the inside. Clara screamed, but it echoed back as laughter. Hers. Layered. Warped. And then, a single flash. A mirror. She wasn't looking into it. She was inside it. Her face stared back. Only it wasn't hers anymore. Clara's reflection stared back at her from the void. Not distorted, not monstrous, worse. It was perfect. Too perfect. Like someone had rebuilt her face from memory, polishing each feature until it gleamed with unnatural familiarity. She blinked. So did it. But a moment too late. The eyes were just a fraction off. The smile lingered longer than it should have, like it was waiting to see what emotion she'd wear next, so it could copy it with better posture. She raised her hand. The mirror did too, but again, too slow, too smooth, not mirrored, mimicked. This wasn't a reflection. It was an audition. Then it spoke, not aloud, in her head. A voice wrapped in her own tone, but hollow. Like hearing herself from a phone line buried 10 years ago. "Do you remember your real name?" it asked. Clara's lips parted. She tried to say yes, but something caught in her throat. A hesitation. Not because she had forgotten, but because she suddenly wasn't sure she hadn't made it up. The thing in the mirror smiled wider. Every piece you gave away became part of us. Every lie, every denial, every time you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't. We kept those. You fed us. Clara pressed her hands to her ears, but it didn't stop the voice. It's not just this house. There are others. Rooms inside rooms. Houses inside people. You're one of them now, she screamed. The mirror cracked. A single hairline fracture streaked down the middle, and through it, something pulsed behind the glass. A shape, long limbed, shifting, made of her. Like her memory had been turned inside out and stitched into a silhouette. Then something new happened. It reached forward. From the other side of the mirror, the thing pressed its hand to the glass. And this time, it came through. Not the whole arm, just fingertips. Pale, wet, trembling. Clara backed away, tripping in the void that shouldn't have had floors or gravity or even directions. The fractured space behind her spun wildly, showing glimpses of other rooms, other doors, other people. All caught mid-scream. Some she recognized. Faces she'd seen in the hollow. Others she didn't. But all of them had one thing in common. They were being worn. Skin peeled like coats. Voices repeated like mantras. None of them remembered who they'd been. The hand withdrew. Then the voice spoke again, low and slow. Not mocking this time, certain. You didn't kill the heart. You just woke it up. The mirror shattered completely. Clara fell backward, spiraling through the shards, each one showing a different version of her. Some smiling, some crying, one mouthing something with bloody lips. "We never leave." She hit ground, real ground. The thud knocked the breath out of her lungs, and for a moment she just lay there, blinking up at a cold, dark sky. No stars, no moon, but real air, real earth. She sat up. The iron key was gone. In its place, clutched in her hand like she'd never let it go, was a photograph. Black and white, faded. It showed her standing in front of the Vale house. Only she didn't remember this picture being taken, and someone else was in the photo. A woman, smiling, standing just behind her shoulder, except her face had been scratched out, deeply, violently, carved until only a smear remained. Beneath the photo, a date June 21st, no year. The wind picked up suddenly, and the world shifted again. She turned around. The Vale house stood behind her. Whole, clean, lights on in every window. The red door slightly ajar. No scorch marks. No melted flesh. No sign of collapse. She stumbled back, heart pounding. This wasn't a reset. It was a loop. and then the porch light flicked on. Inside the house, a shadow moved. Someone was walking through the hall. Someone who looked like her. Wearing her old sweater, her boots, Clara watched, frozen, as this other version of her stopped at the mirror by the staircase and adjusted her hair. Then she smiled. Not into the mirror. At Clara. Through it. Clara turned to run and collided with someone. A man. Alex. But not. His eyes were flat, lifeless. He reached out and touched her cheek, gently. "You're going back in," he said. "You always do." Then he stepped aside, revealing the forest behind him. But not the one she'd run through. This one was upside down. Trees reaching up like veins. Sky beneath her feet. Roots above her head. The world had flipped. And a door stood in the middle of it. Same shape. Same handle. Only this time, carved across its surface were words she hadn't seen before. "We watched you build this." She didn't know what was worse. That she believed it, or that some part of her remembered. To be continued. Clara stood at the threshold of the upside, down forest, heart buckling under the weight of recognition she couldn't explain. The door in front of her pulsed like it was breathing, and the words carved into it, "We watched you build this," sank into her skull like heat into wax. Her hand hovered near the handle, fingers trembling. Not because she was afraid of what was behind the door, but because some part of her wanted to open it. That was the trick, wasn't it? It never forced her. It only waited for her to choose. Behind her, the Vale house stood perfectly still, as if frozen in a photograph from someone else's life. The lights in the windows no longer flickered, they glowed. Steady, warm, fake. Her other self was still inside, going through the motions, playing the role Clara had left behind. How many versions of her were still inside? How many would keep walking the halls, humming lullabies to walls that remembered the pitch better than she did? Clara turned back to the upside-down woods and stepped through the door. The moment she crossed the frame, the world tilted violently, not like falling, but like shifting into a place where gravity was opinion, not law. The trees rose beneath her feet, bark slick and black like old tar, and the sky pulsed above, a reflection of soil and rotting leaves. Every step made a hollow thud, as if the forest was more echo than matter. There was no wind, but the trees moved anyway, swaying toward her as she passed, reaching not with branches, but with suggestion. She didn't know where to go. There was no path, no trail, just movement in the periphery. Every time she looked directly at something, it was gone. But when she looked away, it returned closer. Eyes blinked open on the sides of trees. Mouths whispered from the bark in voices made of breath and memory. You were 6 when you lied for the first time. You left her crying on the stairs. You don't even remember what you buried under the porch. Clara walked faster. The forest wasn't chasing her. It was following her. Big difference. It didn't need to catch her. It already knew where she was going, and eventually she reached it. A clearing. In its center stood a small wooden structure. A shed, plain, familiar. Wrong. She had seen it before, in dreams she hadn't realized were dreams. In memories she'd rewritten. It had been behind her childhood home, once. Or maybe not. Maybe the house she remembered as her childhood home was just the first skin the thing ever wore for her. The shed had no windows, no lock, just a single door slightly ajar, and the unmistakable smell of soil and blood wafting from inside. She didn't want to go in, so she did. The inside was bigger than the outside, much bigger. It stretched downward, steep steps into nothing, no light, no air, just depth. It didn't feel like a structure anymore. It felt like a wound, like someone had dug into the world and refused to stop until they reached something that wasn't supposed to be found. Clara descended. The walls pulsed around her, covered in old wallpaper, the kind from the Vale house. She ran her fingers along it as she moved. Beneath the pattern, carvings, some hers, some others, all written in the same hand. Her own. She stopped when she reached the bottom. A room, circular, stone. At its center, a mirror. Shattered. The pieces were floating midair, spinning slowly. Each shard reflected a different version of her, some older, some bloodied, one laughing manically, another crying, curled on the floor. But one shard caught her eye. It showed her standing in a hospital hallway, fluorescent lights, pale gown, her mother in the bed behind her, dying. Only Clara wasn't moving. She was just standing, watching, expressionless. And then the voice returned. From everywhere. You made us from everything you refused to face. The shards began to spin faster. You filled the rooms with secrets, boarded up the doors with silence, painted the walls with lies. You didn't inherit the house. You built it. The floor beneath her cracked, and tendrils reached through, wet and slow, like fingers feeling their way out of a mouth. Clara backed into the wall. No, she said. I didn't build this. You did, the voice said, quieter now, almost mournful. We just gave it walls. From the mirror shards, her reflections began to step out, one by one, each more twisted than the last. The one in the red sweater with black eyes. The one missing her mouth. The one with hands made of bone. They surrounded her in the room, each tilting their heads at the same time. You're not the real one anymore, said the version of her with the stitched lips, speaking without moving her mouth. We all are. They closed in. Clara dropped to her knees. And then, a knock. Not inside the room. Above the door, 3 slow, steady knocks. The copies paused. Another knock, and a voice, faint, male. Alex. You don't belong to it, he called. You never did. The room shook violently, like the lie had been hit with a hammer. The shards shattered completely. The copy screamed. Clara stood, ran. The stairs reappeared. She climbed. Every step was agony, like dragging herself through the throat of something furious. But at the top, the door opened. Alex stood there, eyes clear, hands outstretched. He pulled her through, and the forest collapsed behind them like a lung finally exhaling its last breath. She looked at him, breathing hard. How did you find me? He didn't answer. Just looked at her for a long moment and said, Do you remember what today is? She blinked. What? He pointed behind her. The door they'd just escaped through was gone. But carved into the tree where it had been was a single word. Home. And below it, June 22. Clara turned to him. That's today. Alex nodded. And it always is. Clara didn't answer at first. She just stared at the tree. The word home carved with such precision, it might as well have been written yesterday. And maybe it was. Maybe it always had been. Beneath it, the date June 22 seemed to shimmer in the bark, oozing a thin line of sap the color of old blood. She reached out and touched it. It was warm, soft, like skin. The tree shivered beneath her fingers. She turned to Alex. His eyes were steady now, no longer glassy or haunted. They looked the way they had before the house, before everything. But something in her refused to trust the moment. It was too still, too calm. It had the shape of peace, but none of the weight. She took a cautious step back, and his gaze followed. You said today always is, she whispered. What does that mean? Alex's expression didn't change. It means we never left. Clara's pulse skipped. No, that can't be. I saw the field. The forest. You saw what it needed you to see, he said, voice almost gentle. The house doesn't trap your body. It traps your day, the one you carry with you, the one you can't let go. She shook her head. No, this isn't some memory loop. This is real. I bled in there. I burned its heart. I tore it apart. You tore apart a room, he said. Not the house. You don't even remember how it started, do you? Clara opened her mouth, but nothing came out, because he was right. She couldn't remember what brought her to the Vale house in the first place. Couldn't recall the drive, the realtor's name, even her last conversation before she walked through that red door. Every time she tried, the memories blurred, like film stretched too tight, color bleeding from the edges. You've been living the same day, Clara, he said. Ever since the first knock on the cellar door. It's not linear. It's layered. Every escape you think you find is just a deeper floor. You fall into another version of the same truth. She felt the ground tilt under her, like the roots of the trees had started to move again. But she didn't fall. Alex stepped closer. "There's a room you haven't found yet," he said. "Not in the house. In you." "What are you talking about?" "The calendar," he said. "You tore it off the fridge. You remember." She didn't. But as soon as he said it, the image slammed into her like a train. Her hand on the cheap paper calendar, ripping off the page to reveal the date June 22, over and over and over. Every day, the same gesture. The same illusion of progress. That's when she remembered the fridge magnets, the ones that kept rearranging themselves, spelling out words she didn't notice until now. Words like stay and again. "Time doesn't pass here," Alex said. "It bleeds, slowly, until it runs dry." She clutched her head, nails digging into her scalp, trying to steady the whirl in her mind. The trees swayed faster now. The sky above rippled like water. "What do I do?" she asked, barely more than a whisper. "You go back," he said. "But not to escape. You go back to remember." "No," she shook her head. "I already remembered too much." He stepped closer, leaned in. "You haven't remembered the thing that made the house notice you." Those words landed differently, because somewhere inside she knew he was right. Something had noticed her. Before she ever crossed the threshold, something she had carried into the house. Not fear, not pain, guilt. Alex stepped back, and the forest split open behind him. Not with light, with doors. Hundreds. Floating, spinning, suspended in mid-air like frames torn from a dream. Each one with her handwriting on the front. Labels. "Do not open. Do not look. Do not touch." One of them began to drift forward. She could read it clearly. June 22. The day I stopped answering her calls, her breath caught in her throat. She reached out, but Alex grabbed her wrist. "Not that one. Not yet." He pointed. Another door approached. This one smaller, faded. The ink almost gone. June 22. The day the mirror didn't recognize me, she touched it. The door swung open, and she stepped inside her old apartment, not in fragments. Not in dream logic, fully formed. Coffee on the table, curtains drawn. A single voicemail blinking red on her landline. The air smelled like toast and lavender. The way it used to when she didn't know what Drade meant. And sitting on the couch, with her legs tucked under her, was herself, but younger. A little less tired, a little more her. This version didn't look up, just kept writing in a notebook. Clara stepped closer. She wanted to speak, but the words didn't come. And then her younger self paused, pen hovering above the page. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "She called again today." Clara's throat tightened. The younger version smiled sadly. "I didn't answer. I don't want to hear her cry again. Not when I don't know how to help." Then she closed the notebook and whispered, "But what if it was the last time?" The world shook. The floor began to crack. The calendar on the wall flipped violently, each page screaming the same date, June 22, June 22, June 22. The ceiling split open, and from it, something dropped. A mirror. It shattered at Clara's feet. She looked down, and in every shard, she saw herself standing in a room she didn't recognize. A white hallway, a hospital, and at the end of it, a woman. Pale, small, wires in her arms. Her mother, calling her name. Clara fell to her knees and wept, because now she remembered. She had ignored the call. She had stayed away. And she had told herself it was fine, that everything would wait. But the house had heard the lie, and it had built a life around it. She looked back at Alex, now standing in the doorway, his face unreadable. "You didn't bring the house," he said. "You were the house." Clara didn't move. The words settled over her like dust, slow and suffocating. "You were the house. Not inside it, not haunted by it, but part of it, its pulse, its spine, its memory." Her breath slowed until it barely rose in her chest. Somewhere deep inside, she felt something give way, like a door unlatching in the dark. A memory that had always been there, curled tight like a worm inside an apple, finally straightening out. It wasn't a single moment that built the house. It was many little choices, silences, things she didn't say, feelings she folded and tucked away until they hardened into walls, regrets she buried so deeply they grew roots. She'd thought trauma was something inflicted, but now she realized it was also something grown, room by room, and she had been building for years. The scene around her, the younger version of herself on the couch, the forgotten voicemail blinking red, the untouched coffee growing cold, began to dissolve. Like ink bleeding through paper, the details blurred and faded until she was kneeling again in the forest. The doors above her swayed gently in a wind she couldn't feel. Alex was still there, watching her. But his expression had changed. He didn't look like someone who had escaped. He looked like someone waiting. She stood slowly, the weight of what she now knew anchoring her bones. "Is this why I couldn't leave?" He nodded once. "The house doesn't trap you because it wants to. It traps you because it knows you'll come back." Clara swallowed hard. "Why me?" "Because you gave it the shape." The forest trembled slightly around them, and the floating doors began to dim, one by one. Some cracked open just enough to reveal flickering scenes inside, empty bedrooms, staircases that led to nowhere, photographs of people with no faces. "But how did it start?" she asked. "What was the first room?" Alex turned, gesturing toward a small door nearly hidden among the trees. It was plain. Gray. No handle, no writing, just a faint outline like a scar on the bark. "That one," he said. "It's always the one you don't look at." Clara walked toward it, branches parting without touching her. Her fingers brushed the frame, and a jolt shot through her arm. Cold, electric, familiar. She pushed. The door opened into a bedroom. Not the Vale house. Not her apartment. This one was smaller, childhood-sized. Her twin bed in the corner, stuffed animals lined in a neat row. Posters on the walls. A nightlight glowing gently in the socket, and in the middle of the room a hole, perfectly circular, right where the rug used to be. Clara stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and old plastic. She knelt beside the hole and peered in. It wasn't a tunnel. It wasn't even a drop. It was a mirror, one that didn't reflect light. It reflected moments, tiny fragments of time, looping like trapped insects in amber. She saw herself at 8, sitting on the edge of the bed, fingers clenched in her lap, trying not to cry. Outside the door, a voice screamed. Glass shattered, a plate hitting the wall. Her mother begging someone not to go. Her father's voice sharp, cold. Clara in the mirror stared straight ahead, not flinching, not blinking, not seeing. And the real Clara, this older Clara, realized something that shattered her breath into pieces. That was the night she stopped listening. That was the night she built the first wall. A single, quiet thought had formed in her child mind, trying to protect her. If I don't hear it, and it isn't happening. And the house, it remembered that. It was that. The hole in the center of the room pulsed slightly, and a whisper curled up through the floor. Still pretending, Clara stood. "No," she whispered. "Not anymore." And she jumped. Not fell, jumped. Into the mirror, into the moment, into the thing she had spent her whole life burying. There was no impact, just silence. And then, a room, dark, cold. A chair in the middle, someone sitting in it. She approached slowly. It was her mother, older than Clara remembered, thinner, worn down. She was staring straight ahead, lips trembling, eyes wet but not blinking. She turned when Clara stepped forward. "Why didn't you come?" she whispered. Clara opened her mouth. But there were no answers. No right ones, anyway. "I was scared," she said. "And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to be enough for you." Her mother didn't respond right away. Then she said something that cut deeper than any scream. "I wasn't asking you to be enough. I was asking you to be there." Clara dropped to her knees. "I'm sorry." Her mother nodded once, and slowly, gently, reached out her hand. Clara took it. The room began to brighten, not with light, but with memory, with color. with detail. The walls became walls again. The chair softened. The floor warmed. And in the center of the room, a door appeared. Not floating. Not whispering. Just waiting. Clara turned to her mother. She was fading now. Not in pain. Just done. Clara stood, walked to the door, turned the handle, and stepped through. She was back in the Vale house. But this time, it was empty. Dust on the counters. Wallpaper peeling. Floorboards dry and creaky. The red door stood shut. The cellar was dark but silent, and in her pocket a piece of paper. Folded. She opened it. One sentence. Written in her own handwriting, "If I can build it, I can take it down." Clara looked around, and for the first time saw the house not as a prison, but as a blueprint. Clara stood alone in the Vale house, though now she questioned if the place had ever truly been empty. Stillness doesn't mean absence, not here. The walls watched quietly, their hunger softened, maybe even confused. Something had shifted. The house was still, yes, but no longer sure. As if, for the first time, its design had been questioned by its own creator. The paper in her hand trembled slightly in her grip. "If I can build it, I can take it down." 7 words, written in her own hand, with a calmness that didn't match the panic currently unfolding inside her ribcage. How long had she been writing to herself? How many versions of Clara had clawed toward the same epiphany? Was this the first time she'd made it this far? Or simply the first time she remembered? The thought was dangerous, tempting, because with it came the next, what if I fail again? And she knew with bone, deep certainty, that doubt was how the house found its cracks to crawl back in. She tore her eyes from the note and looked around the front room. In daylight, it looked almost plain. Familiar. The kind of home you drive past without noticing. But the corners were wrong. Too sharp. The shadows too eager. The architecture of denial. A house built not to protect, but to conceal. She started with the living room. She touched the mantel where no photos ever hung. She ran her fingers along the walls where the wallpaper peeled like shedding skin. And as she moved, she began to see it. Not the house, but the intent. The way certain rooms had never opened until she was desperate. The cellar door always half ajar. The mirror at the top of the stairs that had never reflected light quite right. This wasn't just design. It was instinct. The house had been shaped by fear, reinforced by guilt, sealed by the decisions she hadn't been brave enough to make. She moved to the kitchen next. The smell of burnt eggs was long gone, but it still clung to the corners of her memory. The table where she and Alex once sat, where he had looked her in the eye and asked, "Don't you think it's weird?" was covered in dust, but the 2 chairs remained. She ran her hand over the surface, then paused. There was something etched into the wood. Not carved. Written in blood. She squinted. It was a name. Not hers. Not Alex's. Grace. Clara's breath caught. That was her mother's name. A name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. Not since the funeral she missed. Not since the last call she didn't answer. The house hadn't forgotten. The house had named itself after what she had tried to bury. Clara sat in the chair, where she used to imagine her mother would visit. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she didn't try to fight the memories. She let them come, fast and full of teeth. The silences. The apologies that never reached their destination. The comfort she never learned how to give. And when the grief peaked, something strange happened. The floor shifted, not violently, not with menace. It relaxed, like a breath finally exhaled. Clara stood. The cellar door creaked open. No voices called her this time. No shadows reached. She descended, step by step, into the dark she had once run from. But this time, she brought light. She carried a candle. A real one. The kind her mother used to burn during storms, saying the flicker made the dark feel less alone. At the bottom of the stairs, she expected the familiar. The wax doll, the altar, the symbols etched in blood. But it was different now. The basement was empty. Not blank, empty. A room waiting to be filled. On the far wall, etched in what looked like black chalk, was a doorframe with no door. And above it, words begin again. Clara stepped forward. The outline pulsed under her touch, and suddenly, the house spoke. Not in whispers, not in cruelty, but in memory. Every room she had ever made in her mind. Every locked cabinet. Every dusty hallway. Every "I'm fine" spoken through clenched teeth. All of it shimmered before her like the surface of still water. She understood now. She couldn't destroy the house. It was her. But she could rebuild it. She could choose what stayed and what went. She stepped into the chalk door, and the house let her. Inside, the world was dark. But the blueprints floated in the air, glowing faintly, made of memory and bone and paper and breath. And there, at the center of it all, was a model. A perfect, miniature version of the Vale house, its walls unfinished, its roof open to the sky, its red door gone. She reached down and touched it, and it changed, not collapsed, changed. The living room shrank, the cellar sealed, the mirrors faded, and in the new blueprint, one room was added. A room filled with photos of everyone she remembered, everyone she chose to keep. Her mother, Alex, even the younger versions of herself, the ones that had been left behind. And when she looked up, she was back in the house, not haunted, not cursed, just a house, a place she could choose to live in or leave. She stood in the hallway. Sunlight streamed through the windows. No shadows twitched. The red door was gone. And for the first time in her life, Clara opened the front door and stepped into the world. The wind touched her face, soft, clean, real. And behind her, the house didn't scream. It didn't cry. It simply stood there, silent, watching, grateful. Clara didn't turn back, not at first. The sunlight on her skin felt alien but warm, like the memory of something she'd once trusted. For a long, still moment, she just stood there on the porch, eyes closed, breathing in air that didn't taste like mildew or rot or grief. It tasted like spring, like possibility, like absence, not of something lost, but something finally released. The house behind her was silent, its breath no longer on her neck, its hunger finally sated. Or perhaps finally understood. She stepped off the porch and into the grass. It whispered under her feet, but didn't reach for her. The field stretched endlessly, golden and tall, bending gently in a wind she could feel for the first time in what felt like years. No looping songs. No voices repeating her name. Just the sound of wind, real and random. Free, she kept walking. The Vale house didn't call after her. It didn't need to. That was how she knew it had truly changed. It wasn't trying to hold her anymore. It wasn't following her with memories shaped like chains. It had become something else. Still haunted, maybe, but no longer haunting. A structure stripped of its manipulation, waiting to see what might come next. It could sleep now. Or dream. She walked until the house was a blur on the horizon, and still she didn't turn around. But peace, Clara knew, was fragile. And silence was rarely permanent. After what she'd lived through, what she'd built through, Clara understood that even quiet had layers. Even peace could whisper. She found a tree near the edge of the field and sat beneath it. Her fingers were still stained faintly with soot and ink and something older, but she didn't try to scrub them clean. She kept the piece of paper tucked in her coat pocket, the one that had said, "If I can build it, I can take it down." It had become her compass, her mantra. Proof that she had written herself a way out, even if she hadn't remembered doing it. She stared at the sky until her eyelids drooped, and eventually exhaustion overtook her. She slept. For the first time in what felt like decades. And when she woke, the sky had shifted to twilight, birdsong, crickets, a low breeze, real things, tangible. But then a knock, not loud, not close, but unmistakable. She sat bolt upright, heart skipping. The knock came again, 3 times, deliberate, familiar. Clara turned slowly, but there was no door, only the tree behind her. She pressed her ear to the bark and heard it, breathing from inside. She backed away. The ground beneath her pulsed, Not like the house had. Not angry, not hungry, but aware, awake. Another knock, this time from beneath her. Then a whisper, "You left the door open." Clara's blood ran cold, not from fear, from recognition, because she had. When she rebuilt the house, when she reshaped its rooms and closed the cellar, she hadn't locked it. She had left it open, not out of carelessness, out of hope. A piece of her had wanted to believe that what came through next would be different. That maybe the next version of the house wouldn't need to scream. That maybe, just maybe, it would be a house for someone else, someone stuck, someone ready. Another knock, louder now. She stood, scanning the horizon. No house, no door, just wind and shadow, but she knew what was happening. She had planted the house inside herself, made peace with it, but something else had taken root too. A new room, and someone had entered it. A part of her wanted to panic, to run, but another part, quieter, calmer, understood. This was the shape of healing. It didn't end with peace. It ended with permission. She sat again beneath the tree and waited, and sure enough, a moment later, the breeze shifted, and from somewhere just behind the bark, a voice, small, familiar, "Is it safe?" Clara leaned her head against the tree and whispered back, "Not always. But I'm here." She closed her eyes and let the new knock echo through her chest like a second heartbeat. Clara stayed under the tree long after the voice faded, her breath slow, her heartbeat sensing to something deeper than panic or memory. The field around her held still, the light stretched thin across the sky as twilight deepened into blue. But beneath her hand, pressed flat against the bark, the wood still pulsed, a slow, steady rhythm, not frantic, not sinister, just there, a presence. Like the echo of someone breathing through a wall. She didn't speak again. Neither did the voice. Not yet, but something had changed. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was listening. The knock hadn't been a threat. Not like before. It hadn't tried to lure her. It had asked. Clara rose slowly, body stiff from sleep and from the weight of whatever this was becoming. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the field, the horizon, the sky. No house. No figure waiting in the tall grass. But that meant nothing. The house had always worn disguises, sometimes walls, sometimes people, sometimes herself. But now it felt different. It wasn't chasing her anymore. It was asking her to come back. Not as prey, as blueprint. She pulled the folded paper from her pocket again. If I can build it, I can take it down. And below that, a new line had appeared, written in her own hand, though she'd never held the pen. But what if it wants to be rebuilt? Clara shivered. It was so easy to fall back into fear, to see that question as a trap, but she knew better now. She'd walked through the house's worst corridors. She'd cracked its mirrors and faced her own faces. She had stood inside its broken heart and come out breathing. So she didn't run this time. She walked back toward where the house had once stood. Each step into the field felt heavier than the last, not from resistance, but from memory. Like the ground remembered every version of her that had passed through it, every time she'd crawled, screamed, failed. She walked anyway, and there, at the center of the clearing, something was growing. Not a house, not yet, a foundation. Wood and stone and breath and bone, all of it tangled together in a circular shape, like a ribcage half buried in the earth. As if the house had crumbled in on itself, not into ruin, but into seed. She stepped onto it. The moment her feet touched the structure, a whisper rose beneath her soles. Not a voice. A memory, her mother's laugh, the real one, not the distorted version the house had mimicked, but her, warm and tired and kind. Clara knelt and pressed her palm to the floor. Another memory surfaced, Alex. The way he used to look at her when he thought she wasn't watching. Quiet admiration. Worry he never said aloud. Another. The first time she heard silence and didn't flinch. They were buried here, layered like bricks. She sat in the center of the foundation and let the wind pass over her, eyes closed. And when she opened them again, The red door stood before her, not attached to anything, just a door frame, upright, paint peeled, brass handle dulled, no house behind it, just the frame, just the idea. She didn't touch it. Not yet. She studied it, watched it, and then, for the first time, it opened on its own. No hands, no whisper, no scream. It swung open, and on the other side was a hallway. Not a nightmare, not a trap, a real hallway. Wooden floors, pale walls, photographs in mismatched frames, light from a nearby lamp casting a soft yellow glow, and footsteps, slow, bare, coming toward her. Clara stood, tense, but what came through wasn't a copy. It wasn't her. It wasn't a hollow. It was a child, no older than 7, eyes wide but not afraid, clutching something in both hands, a folded paper. The child stepped through the frame and looked up at her. "I found it," they said. Clara didn't speak. The child offered the paper. Clara took it, unfolded it. On it, in shaky handwriting, "My house is scary, but it's mine. Can you help fix it?" Her throat tightened. She looked back at the door, then at the child, and it hit her, hard and fast and deep. This was how it began. Not with her. With someone else. Another lost thing in another room. Another child building walls they didn't know how to unmake. The house hadn't died. It had learned. Clara nodded. Kneeling, she placed her hand on the foundation again. "Let's build something new," she whispered. The ground pulsed once, and the air filled with the sound of hammers made from memory and breath. The first sound wasn't wood being cut or nails being driven. It was breath, not hers, not the child's, something deeper. The house itself inhaling, not to devour, but to hear. Clara could feel it in the soles of her feet, in the bones of her spine, a slow, careful listening. For once, the structure wasn't trying to impose itself. It wasn't asserting. It was waiting. For permission. The child sat cross, legged at the edge of the skeletal foundation, tracing the grain of a support beam with tiny fingers, as if trying to read its story. Clara remained kneeling in the center, still holding the folded note in one hand. The words on the page were simple. "My house is scary, but it's mine. Can you help fix it?" But there was weight behind them. The kind of weight only shame could write. The kind of weight she recognized. She looked at the red door. Still standing alone like an idea halfway formed, it hadn't closed yet. The hallway behind it remained open, quiet, and inviting in a way that no room in the Vale house had ever been. That hallway didn't twist. It didn't whisper. It didn't watch. It simply was. A space held open. She rose slowly, knees stiff, heart cautious. "What's your name?" she asked the child. The kid shrugged. "I don't know. I forget it sometimes." Clara nodded. "That's okay. I did too once." The wind stirred, but not ominously, just curious. Clara moved to one of the rising beams and pressed her hand to it. The surface was rough, not slick with oil or slick with memory, but real. It didn't resist her. Didn't reach back. It just stood, waiting. And that's when she understood the house wanted to rebuild itself, but it didn't know how to be anything else. It had been born from fear, shame, secrets. She had given it those bricks. And maybe others had too. Maybe thousands. Maybe more. The structure itself was ancient. Clara had just been one of many architects, one of many trapped inside rooms they'd drawn with trembling hands. "I don't think I can fix your house," she said softly to the child. The kid blinked up at her. "But I can teach you how to build one that doesn't have to be scary." The child nodded once, then leaned forward and touched the floor with both palms. The ground responded, slow at first, then steadily. Wooden beams thickened. Nails sprouted and drove themselves into place with soft, deliberate pops. Floorboards connected in tight, careful lines, not warped, not misaligned. They held. They chose to. The red door remained upright, but something shifted about it. The paint began to flake, the brass tarnished to a dull patina. And then, slowly, its hinges creaked and it closed. Gently. For once, it didn't slam. Clara turned to face it. The door was still closed, but no longer waiting to trap. It was waiting to be opened on purpose. The child stood beside her. "Do you want to see mine?" they asked. Clara looked down. "You built one." They nodded. "I kept it inside, like you did. But now I want to show someone." Behind them, the world began to rearrange. The field dimmed. Not fading, focusing. The grass pulled itself flat like a carpet rolled out in preparation. Trees turned, their trunks cracking softly as they rotated to face a single direction. And on the horizon, something small began to take shape. A house. Tunny, crooked, unfinished, but different. No red door, no cellar, no mirrors, just a front step and a window. Clara followed the child toward it, each step lighter than the one before. The foundation didn't tremble beneath them. The ground no longer whispered names. It simply held. The new house had a door made of mismatched boards and a handle shaped like a question mark. Clara smiled when she saw it. "You made this." The child beamed. "I tried." They pushed the door open together. Inside was a single room, small, soft, with no furniture except a chair in the center, and on it, a book. Clara stepped inside. The air smelled of pencil shavings and rain. The child walked to the book and opened it. Blank pages. Except for the first, scrawled in large, nervous handwriting rules for a better house, no hiding in closets. No mirrors that lie. Doors open from both sides. Whispers must use kind words. Every room has a window. No one gets locked in the cellar. If someone gets lost, we leave a light on. Clara stared at the page, then looked around. The walls didn't bleed. The floor didn't pulse. There were no secrets here. Just possibilities. She turned to the child. "You wrote these. They came to me." The house didn't shift, but she did. And somewhere, far behind them, the bones of the Vale house cracked one final time. Not collapsing, exiling, letting go of one more piece. Clara sat in the chair. The child sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, and together, in the safety of a room with no echoes, they began to write the rest of the rules. One by one, the pen moved slowly across the page. It scratched the only sound inside the little crooked house. Clara sat still in the creaky wooden chair, the child beside her watching each letter form with the reverence of someone witnessing something sacred. Outside, the wind shifted, not in warning but as if listening through the cracks in the walls, waiting to see what the next rule would be. Clara hesitated. The ink paused in mid-curve. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, from weight. She'd never written rules before. She'd lived by the ones others gave her, absorbed the ones spoken in glances, swallowed the ones left between the lines of conversations no one ever finished. But now it was her turn, her house, her design. She looked at the page. 8 people can leave. And come back. She exhaled as the sentence settled onto the paper. The child nodded quietly, as if that rule alone shifted something deeper in the foundation than beams and boards. They kept writing. 9. No one has to smile if they don't feel like it. 10. Mirrors are only for seeing, not judging. 11. You can cry wherever you want. The child's handwriting appeared below hers, smaller, sharper, more uncertain. 12. If the house starts whispering again, we whisper back. I'm still here. Clara blinked slowly, tears rising before she knew they had permission. That one. That rule. It wasn't about control. It was about courage. And it didn't come from her. She looked at the child and understood this wasn't someone she had saved. This was a part of her that had waited, buried deep in the hallway between memory and denial. The scared child who never got to say what the rules should have been. Who had been building walls, not homes. Who was finally being heard. They kept writing. More rules, fewer rules. Some crossed out and rewritten with softer words. 13. If someone knocks, we ask them who they are before we let them in. 14. If the room gets too dark, we hold hands. 15. If you forget who you are, we remind you kindly. Hours passed, or maybe none did. Time moved differently here, not trapped, not looping, just gently held. At some point, Clara stood and walked to the window. The house didn't have curtains, but it didn't need them. The sky outside was layered in lavender and gold, like evening didn't want to end yet. Beyond the window, far in the distance, she could still make out the old foundation. The red door was gone. The cracked walls had collapsed into themselves like a dying breath. The place was no longer monstrous. Just quiet. Hollow in the right way. Behind her, the child asked, "Do we have to stay here forever?" Clara turned, smiled softly. "No, we stay until we're ready to go. And when we go, we take the rules with us." She sat again. The book was thick now, the ink slightly smudged in places, pages curling at the corners. A living book. A breathing blueprint. She imagined hundreds like it, scattered across the world. Each one born from someone brave enough to look at the monster and ask, "What if I made it better?" Clara closed the book gently. The wind outside hushed. The child stood and walked to the door. This one didn't creak. It didn't threaten. It simply opened. And on the other side, not another forest. Not a mirror. Just a road and sunlight. Clara walked beside them, barefoot, her shoes left beneath the chair like the story didn't need them anymore. They stepped into the light together, and this time no voice called after them. No knock followed, just the sound of 2 sets of feet in the dust, and the quiet of a house that had learned how to be more than its fear. The road stretched long and pale beneath, a sun that didn't burn but warmed. Not too bright, not too sharp, just enough to remind Clara what light could feel like when it didn't come with conditions. She and the child walked side by side, and though neither of them spoke, something passed between them in the silence. A rhythm, a shared breath. Their shadows moved naturally now, no delay, no twitch, no reaching hands pulling from beneath. Just shadows, as they were meant to be. They passed trees that bent slightly in their direction. Not with menace, but familiarity. These were trees from the edge of memory, from old backyards and dream fragments, the kind you remember as larger than life and half, believe they never existed at all. A swing dangled from one branch, still swaying. An old tire, gray with dust, sat near a fence that ended where the world faded to white. Details flickered and vanished at the edges of her vision, not broken, not threatening, just undecided. Because the road wasn't just a path forward, it was her, unfolding, choosing, and it remembered. With each step, pieces returned to her, fragments she hadn't realized were missing. The way her mother used to hum over the sink, the sharp scent of metal when she picked at scabs as a child, the bitter taste of goodbye left unsaid. All of it came back in flashes, not to haunt, but to reclaim. As if she was sewing herself together with pieces the house had pulled apart. They came to a place where the road split. One path veered toward a small cabin, soft smoke rising from its chimney. The other led toward a narrow footbridge stretching into fog. The child looked up at Clara. Which way? She studied both. The cabin looked safe, familiar, like rest. But the bridge whispered differently. It didn't lure. It didn't promise. It simply offered. A chance to keep going. "I've rested enough," Clara said. The child nodded. They walked to the bridge. Its boards were thin, but steady. The fog on the other side curled and drifted like breath from something sleeping. Clara stepped on the first plank, half expecting it to splinter, but it held. The child followed. As they moved deeper into the mist, the world behind them faded, not lost, just no longer needed. Clara felt it in her bones. She wouldn't go back to the Vale house. Not because it had vanished, or because she couldn't, but because it didn't need her anymore. And she didn't need it. They crossed the halfway point. That's when the whispers returned. Not cruel, not coercive. Gentle this time, like pages turning. "You left the light on. We're still reading. You made us better." Clara slowed, hand tightening around the book of rules they'd brought. She could feel it humming faintly now, like it wanted to be opened again. But not by her, by someone else. Someone waiting on the other side. The bridge ended in a gate, wrought iron, twisting with symbols she half recognized. Childhood doodles, Half-formed letters, broken clock hands, fragments of lullabies. The child reached up and touched it. The gate creaked open. Beyond it, new grass, new trees, new sky, not memory, possibility. They stepped through. And the moment they did, something behind them closed. Not a door, not the bridge, something older, a chapter. Clara looked at the sky. The sun above this place moved, not fast, but at a pace she hadn't seen in a long time. Time itself had returned. No more loops, no more rewinds. The world ahead was wide, and hers. The child ran forward through the grass, laughing, light, whole, real. Clara didn't chase. She just followed, slowly, smiling. For the first time, there was no echo in her steps, no breath at her neck, only the sound of her own feet, walking forward, carrying all the rooms she had unbuilt. Clara didn't speak as she walked. The grass brushed her legs like it knew her, soft and forgiving, not trying to trip her or pull her back like the old house's creeping tendrils. The child ran ahead, weaving between crooked trees and low stone arches that rose suddenly from the earth like bones half buried, relics of some world built and then abandoned. But the land here didn't feel haunted. It felt inherited, as if someone before her had stood where she stood now and chosen not to fear what came next. In her hands, the book of rules felt heavier than before, not in burden but in meaning. Each page was soaked in something deeper than ink: experience, cost, forgiveness. Her thumb traced the corner as she walked, and though she didn't open it, she could feel the words inside vibrating, almost eager to be read by someone else. It was no longer hers alone. That was the point. She reached a clearing, a natural circle, surrounded by trees with branches that leaned in as if listening. The child had already stopped there, arms wide, head tilted toward the sky like they were waiting for something. Clara paused at the edge. "What is this place?" she asked. The child didn't answer, because it wasn't a place to explain. It was a place to remember. All around them, the space began to shift, not in the way the Vale house twisted, but softly, gently, like a memory being returned to the right shelf. The grass rippled, the trees sighed, and one by one, doorways appeared, not connected to buildings or walls, just standing freely, alone. Dozens of them, each with a different frame, different shape, some tall and thin, others rounded like chapel windows. One carved with symbols Clara couldn't read but instinctively knew. Every door held something behind it. Not threats, not traps, just rooms. Her rooms. The ones she'd locked away. One door swung open. Inside a hospital room. The last time she saw her mother alive. But it looked different now. Less sterile, less final. Her mother's eyes weren't blank anymore. She was smiling. Tired, yes, but grateful. Clara stepped back. Another door opened. A stairwell, endless. The one she used to dream about falling down as a child. But this time, there was a railing, and a light at the bottom. She turned. One more door. A bedroom, dimly lit. Hers. Age 15. The exact moment she'd first whispered, "I'm not okay," into her pillow with no one listening. But now someone sat at the edge of the bed. Not judging. Just waiting. The rooms weren't haunted anymore. They weren't wounds. They were stories. And stories didn't have to end in silence. The child moved between the doors, peeking into each room, humming softly. The same lullaby Clara once hated hearing in the house. Now it made sense. It wasn't a trick. It was a call, a reminder. That even the scariest rooms had doors you could walk through instead of into. Clara stepped into one of them. Her first apartment. The kitchen, dim. She stood in the doorway and watched herself sitting at the table, writing something on the back of a bill envelope. She stepped closer. The past version of her didn't look up. But Clara didn't need her to. She crouched beside the old chair and whispered, "You're not broken." The room shimmered. Not violently. It simply let go. When she stepped back out into the clearing, the door vanished behind her. Not slammed. Not sealed. Fulfilled. She walked to the child, who now held their own folded piece of paper. Clara didn't ask where it came from. The child opened it and began to read aloud Rule 16. Not every locked door is keeping you out. Some are keeping the hurt in. When you're ready, knock. Gently. The clearing was quiet for a long time. Then a new door appeared, wooden, familiar, the exact height and shape of the front door to the Vale house. But it wasn't red anymore. It was unfinished, sanded, waiting. Clara stepped forward and placed her hand on it. The child followed. Together they opened it. Inside wasn't darkness. It wasn't light. It was blankness, space, a new room, unwritten, and this time the walls waited for her, not to define them, but to decide if they needed to exist at all. The air inside the unwritten room didn't press or pull. It simply existed, still, present. A breath held by something older than memory but younger than grief. Clara crossed the threshold with quiet steps. Her body braced instinctively for some rush of cold or the low thrum of invisible dread. But nothing came. No tricks. No sighs through unseen vents. Just silence. Honest, unsettling, peaceful silence. The child entered behind her, clutching the rulebook like a talisman. They said nothing, but Clara could feel their eyes scanning every inch of the space, as if trying to see a shape in something that had none. The room had no corners, no ceiling, but no sky, just space that shimmered softly in places where thought collided with memory. It was a room that wasn't asking to be filled. It was asking to be understood. Clara took a step forward. Beneath her feet, the floor shifted slightly. Not threatening, not unstable, just responsive. Like walking across the surface of a dream not yet told. She looked down and saw her reflection ripple beneath her, not a mirror image, but a moment. Herself, seated at a window, older, peaceful. She blinked and it vanished. The room, she realized, didn't just reflect. It anticipated. This room doesn't have a name, the child said behind her, finally speaking. Not yet. Clara nodded. Some rooms don't get one until you're ready. The child sat cross-legged near the center, the book of rules open on their lap. They flipped to a blank page and held the pen poised over it, waiting. Clara didn't rush. Instead, she turned in a slow circle, letting her breath match the rhythm of the place. She could feel the house, the new house. Beyond this room, still adjusting to its new shape, still learning to exist without echoing every buried scream. This room was a gift, or maybe a final test, not one designed by the house but by her. A space made entirely for the purpose of choosing what came next. No more survival, no more running, just decision. She walked to the center and sat opposite the child. They passed her the pen. Clara stared at the blank page. The weight of every room before this one pressed gently against her back, not crushing, reminding. She thought of all the spaces she'd known. The locked bathrooms, the echoing stairwells, the hospital rooms with chairs turned toward walls, the kitchen where silence screamed louder than violence ever had, and she thought of the rooms yet to come. Coffee shops where someone might ask how her day was, and actually listen. Libraries where her hands might brush against another's, not with fear but hope. Bedrooms where she could leave the door open, not because she was brave, but because she no longer had to be afraid. She pressed the pen to the paper, wrote a single word. After, the child leaned over and read it aloud, then smiled. That's a good name for this room. The page absorbed the ink like water on stone. Around them, the space began to settle. Not close in, settle. As if the room was exhaling after a long, long breath. Clara stood and offered her hand to the child. They rose together. Outside the doorway, the rest of the house waited. Not haunting, not watching, welcoming. The walls now held shelves instead of whispers. The mirrors reflected only what stood before them. The cellar had been filled with soil and flowers that grew in the dark. And the red door, repainted in soft gray, no longer swung on its own. It waited for visitors, not victims. They stepped out of the room called after and into the hallway. No more tricks, no more shifting floors. Just quiet wooden steps and the smell of cinnamon from a kitchen that had never existed but now somehow did. As they passed, doors opened slightly, not wide, not forced. Enough to say you're welcome back. Enough to ask, will you stay this time? Clara didn't answer aloud. She didn't have to. Some rooms didn't need a response. They only needed to be left open. Clara didn't remember falling asleep. One moment she was standing just outside the room called after. The next she was waking up in a chair that hadn't been there before. Rocking slowly in the front room of the house that no longer hurt her. Morning had arrived with quiet feet, light slanting through windows that hadn't existed yesterday. The floor was warm beneath her bare feet, and the child sat curled up on a rug nearby, fast asleep, rulebook hugged tightly to their chest like a stuffed animal. Everything was still, but not empty. The kind of stillness that came after the storm. Clara exhaled. Not just breath, something deeper. Some knot inside her that had finally untied. She stood, legs a little stiff, and wandered toward the door. It wasn't red anymore. It hadn't been since the room unmade itself. It was soft gray now, with a bronze knob that didn't hum or breathe or blink when touched. A door that waited to be opened, but only when she chose. She touched the knob, paused, and then something new. Not dread, not a whisper, a knock. Clara's heart didn't leap this time. It fluttered, but gently. A knock could mean anything now. An arrival, a return, an invitation. The rules had changed. The doors had changed. She had changed. She turned the knob and opened it. And there, standing on the porch in the morning sun, were two people. Real, solid, breathing. A woman with tired eyes and hands clenched too tightly at her sides. A boy behind her, no older than 10. Looking at the house the way people look at water when they've been wandering deserts too long. They didn't speak right away. Clara didn't push. The woman's mouth opened, then shut, like she was trying to decide if she'd made a mistake. Her gaze darted behind Clara, into the house. Clara stepped aside slightly, just enough to say, "Look, I'm not hiding anything." The woman finally spoke. "This is the house, right? The one from the stories." Clara's lips curled slightly, but not into a smile. "It used to be." The woman swallowed. Her hands trembled. "I heard something here. I don't know how to explain it. I was driving and it was like something pulled me off the road. Not forced. More like it remembered you," Clara finished. The woman nodded, startled. The boy peeked from behind her, eyes scanning Clara's face. Clara bent down slightly, hands on her knees. "Did it knock for you too?" He nodded. "I thought I was dreaming," he said. "You might have been. Sometimes dreams are just practice for when the real door opens." The boy stepped forward before the woman could stop him. Clara didn't move. He climbed the porch stairs and stood in front of her. "Does it still eat people?" he asked. Clara blinked, surprised, but not thrown. "No," she said gently, "but it remembers being hungry." He looked past her into the hallway, where the light stretched softly across the floor. "Can I see?" She looked at the woman. "He's safe. You both are. But only if you want to be here." The woman hesitated. The old fear still clung to her, not of monsters, but of hope. Because sometimes that was the scariest thing of all. Clara held the door wider. "You can come in," she said. "But we don't force healing here. We just let it start when you're ready." The boy stepped in first. The house didn't creak. It didn't whisper. It simply received. The woman followed. And as the door shut gently behind them, something flickered in the far room. A light turning on. Not from electricity, from choice. Clara watched them move slowly through the hall. The boy running his hand across the wall, the woman pausing by the photos that hadn't been there yesterday. The child with the rule book stirred awake, sat up and smiled. Another knock, 3 soft raps. Clara opened the door again. This time a man, gray beard, hollow eyes, holding a tattered photograph in his hands like a key. Behind him, 2 teens with haunted shoulders and bruised voices. More footsteps, more knocks, more arrivals. Not all spoke. Some simply stood at the threshold waiting. Clara didn't ask why they came. She didn't need to. The house had begun to listen. And the world had started to whisper about the place where your monsters didn't get chased out. They got rewritten, room by room, rule by rule. She opened the door again and again, each face different, each knock softer. The house that had once fed on fear was now something else entirely, a home. For anyone brave enough to come inside and leave the door open behind them. It didn't take long for the house to start changing again. Not violently this time, not the unpredictable lurch of shifting floors and howling walls, but organically, as though it was listening to the people moving through it and quietly reshaping itself around them. Clara didn't build anymore. She didn't need to. The foundation she had laid, both literal and internal, was strong enough now that the walls rose on their own when someone needed them, and dissolved just as easily when they didn't. Doors still appeared, but now they had names written in chalk. Rooms remembered who they were for. The boy who had first followed Clara into the house had claimed the room at the top of the stairs. A small, square space with a window that looked out onto a sky that changed with his mood. Blue on calm days, overcast when he was sad. He painted the walls with messy streaks of color, and no one stopped him. The house didn't blink. It embraced the chaos like it was part of the healing. Others came too. A woman who hadn't spoken in years found a room that hummed softly with music only she could hear, and within days, she began to sing again. Not words at first, but pure, trembling notes that echoed through the hallways like a song the house had been waiting to remember. A boy with burns on his arms found a room with cold stone floors and no mirrors. He stayed for hours in the quiet, just lying flat against the ground, breathing. When he finally emerged, his hands were covered in clay, and the house had built him a kiln. There were rules, of course. The book lived on a lectern in the main room now, pages turned by curious hands and added to with careful scrawl. Rule 17, you don't have to talk, but we're here if you do. Rule 18, some nights are just for crying. That's okay. Rule 19, if the door closes too hard, try again. Try softer. Clara wrote that one herself. People stayed for days, or hours, or sometimes only long enough to leave something behind. A sketch, a whispered memory, a lock of hair, a single word carved into a stair, forgive. The house grew not outward, but inward. Each story it absorbed didn't fill it. It opened it. The spaces didn't stack on top of each other like some monstrous labyrinth. They folded alongside, blooming like rooms in a dream, each one only appearing when needed. It never felt crowded. It never felt empty. It simply made room. And still, Clara found herself waking before dawn, sitting quietly at the window of the room called after, watching the sun rise over a horizon that shifted depending on who needed it most that day. Sometimes forest, sometimes sea. Once, just an endless white field dotted with sunflowers taller than the roof. She was no longer haunted, but she remembered what it felt like. And that was the difference. She didn't run from the echoes anymore. She taught others how to listen to theirs. One evening, the child who had first stepped through the red door sat beside her again, older now, not physically, but in posture, in presence. Their eyes no longer darted at every creak. Their shoulders had uncurled. Do you think it ever stops? They asked. What? The knocking. Clara considered this. No, she said, but it changes. The child nodded. I heard one today, they whispered. From the far hallway. One we haven't opened yet. Clara stood, brushing imaginary dust from her lap. Then let's go. They walked together through the house that no longer needed blueprints, down a hallway that hadn't existed yesterday, but already felt familiar. The door at the end was plain wooden, unassuming. No brass handle, no red paint, just a knock, not desperate, not angry. 3 soft taps. Clara placed her hand on the wood and felt it. A heartbeat. Faint. Afraid. The child looked up at her. Will it be bad? Maybe, Clara said honestly. But we don't open it alone. They pushed together. The door swung wide. Inside was a boy, maybe 12, knees pulled to his chest, eyes ringed with darkness and a scream trapped in his throat. The room was cold. The kind of cold that comes from being forgotten too long. He looked up, terrified. Clara stepped inside. Kneeling, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the rule book. Flipped to the latest page. She read aloud. Rule 20: when someone knocks from the dark, we light a candle and sit with them until they remember the way out. The child lit the candle. The boy blinked at it, once, twice, and then, without a word, he reached forward and held it in both hands. The room warmed. The scream dissolved. And the house made another room. Clara didn't flinch when the boy cried. He didn't scream. He didn't sob. He just cried the way some people bled, slowly, silently, as if he had grown used to doing it unnoticed. The candlelight flickered between them, its glow painting soft gold on the boy's face and turning the sharp bones of sorrow into something almost tender. The room was small, windowless, shaped more like a closet than a bedroom, but now that the door was open, it breathed. The cold that once clung to the walls had thinned. The shadows had stopped curling at the edges. She waited. That was the rule. She didn't pull, didn't prod, just stayed, her knees pressed into the floor, her palms open in her lap, letting him see that she wasn't going anywhere. The child sat beside her, leaning their shoulder into hers, and together they made a triangle of warmth, a shape stronger than bricks, a moment more protective than locks. Eventually, the boy wiped his eyes with a dirty sleeve and whispered, "I thought I was the only one here." "You were," Clara said. "But we heard the knock." He looked at the candle. "It's small." "Small's enough," said the child. "Small's how all of us started." The boy nodded and took a shuddering breath, as though the act of being seen had fractured something in him. Something old and rigid. He didn't smile, but his shoulders dropped. His eyes flicked toward the rule book, still resting open in Clara's hand. "Can I write one?" Clara passed him the pen. He wrote carefully, tongue sticking slightly between his teeth, and when he was done, he closed the book like it meant something. Like it was sacred. They didn't ask what he wrote, not until later. When the boy had been given a room, not chosen, not built, simply found. A room shaped like his first memory of safety. A room that didn't need locks. When Clara finally opened the book again that night, Rule 21 stared back at her in crooked, shaky print, "If you think no one is coming, knock anyway." Sometimes the right person is already on their way. She closed the book with trembling hands and looked around the house. It was changing again. Not in shape, in tone. Every wall hummed now, not with voices, not with screams, but with stories, laughter, breath, pages turning, doors opening, and candles. So many candles. They dotted the stairwells and glowed from under doorframes. Some flickered near windowsills. Others floated in bowls of water on nightstands, the flames too calm to ever spill. No fire alarms, no smoke, just light. A constant reminder that someone somewhere had chosen to stay awake in case someone else was still walking in the dark. More people came. They didn't all knock. Some just arrived, led by whispers of a house that didn't promise answers, only space. Space to hurt, space to rest, space to rebuild. One afternoon, Clara found a girl asleep in the hallway beneath a coat rack. No suitcase, no shoes, just dirt under her fingernails and a piece of paper crumpled in her fist. Clara sat beside her and waited. The girl stirred. "You're safe," Clara said, the words coming automatically now, not from habit, but because they'd become true. The girl opened her hand. The paper had no message. Just a single, childlike drawing. A house, big and square, with windows like eyes and smoke puffing from a chimney in the shape of a question mark. Clara smiled. "I think we can find that one for you." They did, 2 floors up. Next to the room with the sea, blue walls, and the rocking chair that no one claimed. But everyone sat in eventually. The girl didn't speak for 3 days. Then she painted a mural across her bedroom ceiling. Birds, dozens of them. and one open window. The house never questioned it. The candles never flickered out. And Clara, no longer guide, no longer trapped, moved through it all like a keeper of stories, not a warden. She wasn't in charge. She was simply present, a witness, a caretaker of the rooms once forgotten. In the kitchen, someone had written another rule on the chalkboard wall, Rule 22. The house doesn't save you. It gives you a place to start saving yourself. Every morning, Clara lit a candle in the window, not because she feared the dark, but because someone, somewhere, might still be walking toward the door, and she wanted them to see the light. Clara awoke to the sound of humming, soft, off-key, human. It came from the hallway just beyond her door, drifting through the air like a thread tugging gently at memory. She sat up slowly, her body moving with the rhythm of someone who no longer feared what the next room held. The house was quiet, not silent, filled with the kind of stillness that only comes when people are finally safe enough to dream. She pulled on her cardigan and stepped into the hall, barefoot, the wood warm beneath her feet. The humming stopped. Down the corridor, past the room with the vine-covered window, and the closet, where someone had left old ballet slippers hanging like relics, Clara saw a door she didn't recognize. That wasn't unusual anymore. The house had begun building on its own schedule. When someone needed something, a space, a moment, a memory, the architecture responded. But this door was different. It had a name carved into it. Her name. Not Clara, but all the other names she'd tried to forget. The ones spoken in anger or whispered in shame. They were etched into the wood like scars, weak, broken, burdened, too much. And beneath them all, in uneven lettering, the one that had stuck longest, invisible. Clara stared. Her throat tightened, the kind of H that came not from fear, but recognition. This was a door she hadn't built, but the house had remembered it for her. A room she had avoided even in her deepest unmaking. She reached out. The wood was cool, not hostile, not even sad, just there. Honest. She opened the door. Inside was a mirror, not cracked, not warped. Just a simple pane of glass, floor length, propped against the far wall. There was nothing else. No furniture, no shadows, no echoes. Clara stepped in and stood before the mirror. Her reflection blinked back at her. Not younger, not idealized, just real. Hair tousled. Eyes rimmed with sleepless compassion. Shoulders that had carried strangers' secrets without bending. A face that had been terrified and brave and wrong and kind, sometimes all at once. She stared for a long time. Then, from somewhere beneath the floorboards, a drawer slid open. She knelt and found a piece of chalk. Not white, but blue. The exact blue of a bruise fading. She took it, stood, and walked to the wall beside the door. The scars were still there, the words she didn't write but had once believed. She drew a line through each, not to erase them, to acknowledge them. Then, in neat script, she wrote her name, just Clara. Beneath it, she added one more line, Rule 23. No room gets to define you without your permission. Not even the ones you hide from. She placed the chalk in the drawer, closed it gently, and turned to leave. But the door didn't close behind her this time. It stayed open. A reminder that the worst rooms lose power the moment you stop walking around them and finally step inside. Back in the hallway, the humming had resumed, now louder, harmonized. Someone else had picked it up, passed it along. The boy from the cellar room sat in the kitchen, humming into his cup of tea. The woman, who had once only spoken through post, it notes, now added melodies between the sentences she read aloud to the girl who painted ceilings. The child was drawing again, this time at the center of the living room floor, surrounded by scraps of paper. On each a different doorway, each leading to a new room, some real, some not yet built. They were building the house again, not out of wood or fear, but story. And the house listened. At night, when the lights dimmed and the candles flickered in their little glass bowls, Clara often stood on the porch and watched the horizon. She had noticed it changing lately, not in shape, but in depth. It seemed wider, as though the world beyond the house had started noticing what was happening within. And sometimes, just sometimes, she saw faint lights in the distance, moving closer, lanterns, headlights, flashlights in trembling hands. People were coming, not just broken, not just desperate, curious, hopeful. Clara smiled. She went back inside, past the mirror room, past the murals, into the room called after, and sat beside the rule book. She turned to a new page and waited for the next knock. The knock was hesitant, barely there. Not a sound meant to announce, but one meant to ask. Clara paused mid-step, a jar of tea leaves in one hand, the familiar weight of anticipation curling in her chest like smoke. It wasn't fear anymore. It was memory echoing in the bones. She set the jar down and walked slowly to the front door, where light filtered through the glass panes in quiet, fractured shards. The house fell still as she approached, not with dread, but reverence. This knock wasn't like the others. This one knew how to wait. When she opened the door, there was no one on the porch. But there was a letter. Clara stared at the envelope. Thick paper, slightly damp with dew. Her name scrawled across the front in handwriting that was painfully familiar. It trembled slightly in her hand as she picked it up, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. She had buried this script in the back of her mind years ago, where it couldn't touch her anymore. Yet here it was, standing on her threshold without a voice, without apology, just presence. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she closed the door and carried it through the house, through the soft chatter of voices and the scent of simmering herbs, past the room where two teenagers were painting opposite halves of a wall without speaking, past the nook where a man who used to flinch at every sound now slept with the door cracked open by choice. She reached the room called after and sat. Only then did she slide her thumb beneath the flap and break the seal. Inside a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no explanation. Just one sentence: I tried to love you the only way I knew how, but it wasn't the way you needed. No signature. None was required. The house didn't move. The room didn't groan. But Clara felt the shift anyway, like something ancient uncoiled in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Something older. Recognition. She had waited years for those words. Had imagined them dripping with spite or begging. But this was neither. It was just truth. And it carried the kind of ache that didn't rot. It rang, long and low, like a bell that didn't want to stop being heard. She folded the letter and placed it inside the rule book. Then, slowly, she turned to the next blank page. The pen in her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, from finality. She wrote Rule 24, you're allowed to grieve the apology you deserved but had to give to yourself. She closed the book. The candle on the windowsill flared for a brief moment, as if nodding. Later that day, a new girl arrived. 16, maybe 17. Dressed in too many layers, eyes darting constantly, mouth pressed into a thin, stubborn line. She didn't knock. She just sat on the front steps and stared at the door. Clara watched her from the kitchen window. Hours passed. Finally, she opened the door and stepped outside, sitting down beside the girl without a word. They sat like that until the sun began to slip low, painting the sky with gold and regret. Are you waiting for something? Clara asked. The girl didn't look at her. I'm not ready to go in. Clara nodded. Then we'll sit here. Until you are. The girl said nothing. But she stayed. As the first star blinked into existence overhead, the girl spoke again, quiet, brittle. I left somewhere. Not because I wanted to. Because I couldn't stay. Clara said nothing. I think I brought some of it with me, the girl whispered. The bad parts. Clara turned, met her eyes. Then we'll help you unpack. The girl blinked, looked down at her shoes, and finally said, will the house know what to do with it? Clara smiled, soft and steady. It already does. That night, a new room appeared, smaller than most, with heavy curtains and thick quilts and a chair that rocked but never creaked. The girl didn't move in right away, but she walked past it and left a pair of her shoes by the door. It was enough. The house understood. The storm rolled in without warning, not with the violence of thunder or the flash of lightning, but with a quiet that unnerved. The air thickened. The wind stopped moving. And within the house, even the walls seemed to pause, listening. Clara stood by the window in the room, called after, watching the sky fold in on itself, a deep gray creeping across the horizon, like a memory long buried, finally finding the surface again. It wasn't the kind of storm that knocked things over. It was the kind that reminded you of something you tried to forget. The kind that made people stare longer at their reflections and forget what they were doing halfway through making tea. The house, so good at adapting now, didn't flicker its lights or twist its halls. It just tightened slightly, like it knew a shadow had slipped inside. Clara found the source in the eastern corridor, one of the oldest wings, the part of the house that hadn't seen much traffic since the first waves of healing had passed through. The hallway smelled different, less like lavender and warm dust, more like iron and ash. She wasn't alone. A boy stood there, older than most who arrived, maybe 17, maybe younger if you looked close enough at the way he held his shoulders like a shield. His hands were empty, but Clara saw it in his eyes. The weight he carried wasn't physical. It was soaked into his skin, dragged behind him like a silent twin. He didn't flinch when she approached. He didn't even blink. "This place isn't real," he said, voice flat. "It can't be." Clara didn't try to convince him. She didn't offer explanations or stories. She knew better. The ones who arrived with shadows clinging to their heels didn't need logic. They needed space. So she nodded and leaned against the wall across from him. "You're probably right," she said, "but it's real enough to hurt you, and real enough to help you back." He looked away, jaw clenched. "I'm not here for help, I know." A beat passed, then another, and then he whispered, "It followed me." Clara's breath caught. She understood now. Some shadows didn't wait at the door. Some came in with you, quiet and smiling, wearing the face of someone you once trusted. The house had seen this before, long ago. It had once been that shadow for Clara. "What does it look like?" she asked gently. He turned to her, and for the first time she saw the full shape of what he carried. Not a figure, not a ghost. A door. A pitch-black door hovering just behind him, tethered to his spine like a second soul. And it was breathing. "Sometimes it talks," he said. "Sometimes it just listens. But it never leaves." Clara stepped forward, slow and sure. She looked at the door, and it looked back. No handle. No hinges. Just dark. The kind that made you forget light ever existed. "I had one too," Clara said. He blinked. "It waited at the foot of my bed. Whispered while I tried to sleep. Made me think it was all I deserved." He studied her face. "What happened to it?" Clara smiled, soft, not triumphant. "I stopped feeding it." The boy looked down, unsure. "I don't know how to stop." "You don't have to know yet," she said. "But you have to stop listening when it tells you no one's coming." Another pause. Then his lips parted. "It told me if I walked into this house, I'd disappear. That I'd be just another lost thing." Clara's voice didn't rise, didn't fight. "And now that you're here." His eyes glistened. "It's quieter." Clara reached out, not to him, but to the space between him and the door. "Let's write a rule." He hesitated, then nodded. Together, they returned to the living room. The child, always nearby in their quiet way, had already brought the book to the table. Clara handed the boy the pen. His hand shook, but the ink didn't smear. "Rule 25, just because the shadow followed you, it doesn't mean it gets to stay." He closed the book. And for the first time since his arrival, he looked behind him. The door was still there, but it had stopped breathing. It wasn't gone, but it had been seen. And sometimes that was enough for the first night. The storm had passed by morning, but it left something behind. Not destruction, stillness. The kind that feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to finish arriving. Clara moved through the house with a quiet alertness, her steps soft on the floorboards, her fingertips trailing the edges of the walls like she was listening through her skin. There was a feeling in the air again, one she hadn't sensed since the earliest days, the kind that came before something new, or maybe something old returning. The boy with the shadow door slept in one of the small rooms near the stairs now. He kept the light on and the curtains drawn. The door hadn't vanished, not completely. It hovered, faint and formless now, like a smudge in the air behind him. But it didn't speak anymore. That was progress. In the kitchen, the girl who painted ceilings had begun adding stars above the pantry. Not constellations, just stars. Ones she said she remembered from when she was small. Ones she wished she'd seen. Everything was normal, which meant something was about to shift. And it did, late in the afternoon, when the front hallway stretched just a little longer than it should have. It was subtle, measured. Clara noticed it first while walking from the entry to the sitting room. An extra step, a moment of silence that didn't belong. She paused and turned. There it was, a new door. It hadn't been there yesterday, hadn't even been hinted at. The wood was darker than usual, old, ancient almost, no frame. Just a slab of wall with a line carved straight down the middle. There was no knob, no handle, but a mark rested above it. A single symbol burned deep into the grain, a circle split down the center. Clara didn't touch it. She simply stared, long enough for the child to appear beside her, drawn as always to the unspoken. "Is it waiting?" they asked. "I don't know," she whispered. The door didn't hum. It didn't knock. It just was. Other people began to notice it too. Some avoided the hallway altogether. Others stood across from it, hands in their pockets, glancing up at it like it might blink. No one tried to open it. Not even the bold ones. There was something about this door that didn't ask to be opened. It demanded to be left alone. Clara spent the night in a chair across from it, a candle burning at her side. She watched as the house exhaled around it. Nothing grew near it. No new rooms appeared nearby. The house didn't hum in greeting the way it sometimes did for new arrivals. This door was not for welcome. But it was part of the house now. That meant it had to be seen. The rulebook sat heavy in her lap. She opened it to a blank page. The pen hovered, uncertain. The child sat cross-legged nearby, watching her. She didn't write a rule this time. She simply wrote, "There are doors that open. There are doors that close. And then there are the ones that choose to stay shut, because they hold something even the brave aren't ready for." She closed the book and blew out the candle. For 3 days, the door did nothing. On the 4th, it pulsed, just once, like a heartbeat. That night, a girl screamed in her sleep, one of the newer arrivals. Not from a memory, from a dream she couldn't explain. She said she saw a door made of ash, with a symbol burning above it, and something knocking from the inside with hands that weren't human. Clara didn't tell her about the one in the hallway. Some doors needed time to decide. The house, ever listening, didn't argue, but it whispered again, not in fear, in warning. Because not all things that come knocking are looking for healing. Some want out, some want in, and some just want to be remembered. Clara stayed near the door each night, the rule book beside her, blank pages waiting. Because sooner or later, someone would try to open it, and she needed to be ready. Clara didn't sleep the night the door pulsed for the second time. It was faint, barely a flutter through the air, but it was different from the first, longer, slower. Like breath exhaled by something that had just remembered it existed. She sat with her back to the hallway wall, knees pulled to her chest. Candlelight drawing long shadows across the floor. The symbol on the door, the split circle, seemed deeper now, like the wood had swallowed it and rebirthed it again. It was not glowing. It didn't need to. It simply was, and that was worse. Presence without movement. Stillness without silence. People began whispering about it. Not loud, not fearfully, carefully. The way one speaks about a scar they don't recall getting. Some said it was new. Others swore it had always been there and they just hadn't noticed. One girl, the one who used to sit for hours by the mirror in the linen closet, claimed it had appeared in a dream long before she arrived. She had drawn it in chalk on her notebook. When Clara asked to see, the girl hesitated, then opened the page. The same symbol, traced in hesitant fingers, and beneath it, scribbled in faint pencil, "Don't say its name. It doesn't want to be known." Clara said nothing. She'd felt it too, that strange edge to the door. The sense that whatever it held wasn't just a memory or fear, or forgotten pain, but something older, something that had watched. The child, silent as always, brought her tea that morning. They sat together in the hallway, saying nothing, watching the door. After a while, the child whispered, "It's not a room." Clara looked over. "What is it then?" The child hesitated. Then, almost too quietly, "A person. Or what's left of one." A chill crawled up Clara's spine. She looked at the door again. If that was true, then maybe the house hadn't built it. Maybe it had let it in. That changed everything. That evening, as candles were lit and people prepared for dinner, a boy, quiet, maybe 12, often seen wandering between rooms, approached the door. Clara saw him before he touched it. She moved fast, but not loud, no yelling, just enough to stop his hand mid-air. "Don't," she said, voice firm. He turned, confused. "I heard something." "What kind of something?" He frowned, eyes squinting as if trying to remember. A voice, but not words. Like it was remembering how to speak. Clara guided him gently away, back toward the kitchen, where light and warmth did what they were meant to. He didn't fight her, but he kept glancing back, like something was still calling to him from behind that sealed wood. That night, Clara sat before the door again. She didn't bring the rule book. She didn't light a candle. She just sat, and finally, for the first time, the door knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. A slow, patient rhythm. She didn't answer, but she spoke. "I don't know your name," she whispered. "I don't think you do either. But I know you're not forgotten. I know you're not ignored. You're seen. But you don't get to write rules here. You don't get to speak unless you mean to heal." The knocking stopped, and then laughter. Not loud. Not manic. Just a soft chuckle, like something testing how much voice it still had. And then it said, muffled behind the wood, "I made this house first." Clara's breath stopped in her throat. It wasn't a threat. It was a memory. And it terrified her more than anything had in a long time. The house moaned, barely audible. Not in pain. In remorse. Clara stood, knees aching, and whispered into the hallway. "Then you remember how it felt to be unloved. You remember what you turned into." Silence. Then, from the door, the soft scrape of something moving behind it. Not pacing. Shifting. Trying to decide if it still belonged. Clara walked away, heart pounding. She didn't look back. In the morning, the door was still there, but the symbol was fading. And for the first time in days, no one dreamed of it. Still, Clara opened the rule book again and wrote Rule 26. Not every voice behind the door deserves a listener. Some things must stay forgotten until they learn how to ask for forgiveness. And just below that, in smaller script, some monsters don't want to be let out. They want to be known. Don't give them a name until they earn it. The door with the fading symbol didn't disappear. It remained in the hallway like an old wound that no longer bled but still ached when the air turned cold. People passed it more easily now, glancing once, maybe twice, before carrying on. It had lost its voice, at least for now. But Clara never trusted silence when it came that suddenly. Silence could be a mercy, or a mask. Still, the house began to breathe again. Its rooms opened themselves more often, like flowers lifting toward sun. There was music some days, real music, not just the quiet humming of healing. but instruments played by hands that had once trembled too much to hold anything. A violin appeared in the study, unclaimed. A battered, upright piano manifested in the east wing with one stubborn key that never stopped ringing even after you let go. One afternoon, the girl who painted ceilings taught the boy with the shadow door how to play a minor scale. He didn't look at her. She didn't ask him to. They just sat on the worn piano bench, fingers finding sound together. That's how it happened now. These wordless bridges between people. These connections that needed no explanation. The house didn't demand stories anymore. It waited for them to be offered freely. And when they were, it listened with the softness of a listener who never interrupts. Clara spent more time outside now. The porch had grown wider without her noticing. The railing had vines curling around its edges, not creeping, but settled. Life that belonged. She sat in the mornings with her tea, and the rule book balanced on one knee, sometimes writing, sometimes reading, sometimes just tracing her fingertips along the spines of memories made solid. She noticed something else, too. The house had started humming. Not a sound anyone could hear directly, not a song, but something beneath it all. Like when you enter a room that's been loved for a very long time and feel the warmth before the heat. The air inside the house felt like arms, not holding, just open. New guests still arrived, not every day, but steadily. Some came carrying bags. Some came with nothing but the clothes on their backs. A few didn't speak for days. One man stood outside the gate for 6 hours, not moving, eyes blank. When he finally stepped through the front door, the floor adjusted beneath him like an old friend rising to greet someone who'd been gone too long. There was a boy, barely older than 10, who wouldn't sleep unless the light in the hallway remained on. The house didn't fight him. It left that bulb glowing warm every night, just enough to chase the edge of his nightmares back into the dark. And there was an older woman, hunched and weathered, who said nothing until she found her room. And then, for the first time, wept like someone who hadn't cried since childhood. When Clara checked on her later, the woman pressed a note into her palm that read, "This is what peace must feel like when it forgets how to shout." Clara added it to the rule book, not as a rule, as a gift. The child stayed close, older now, not in body, but in being. They rarely spoke unless it mattered. They didn't need to. When new ones came, the child was always the first to offer a chair, a blanket, a pen for the book. They had become the house's other pulse. If Clara was its memory, the child was its heartbeat. One evening, just before dusk, Clara stood in the room called after and stared out the window. The sky was blue, sharp and clean, and for the first time in weeks, she saw no approaching headlights, no shadows creeping at the edge of the fields. Just calm, and then she heard it. Not a knock, not a voice. The house itself, humming louder than ever before. She followed it. Down the stairs, through the east wing, past the kitchens and the book rooms, and the small chapel where someone had recently left a folded scarf on the pew as thanks. It led her to a new room, one she hadn't seen. The door was open, inside mirrors, dozens, all blank, none reflected. They didn't show her face, they didn't echo her steps, they simply waited. In the center of the room, a chair. On the chair, a name card, her name. Just Clara. She stepped forward, no fear, only breath. The mirrors shivered, not cracked, alive. They began to show not her now, but her before. Her almosts, her could-have-beens. 1,000 Claras. Each one standing, silent, seen. The house was remembering her, not just what she did, not what she carried, who she was. And suddenly, she realized this wasn't a warning. It was thanks. The house had healed. And now it was asking, are you ready to rest too? Clara did not sit in the chair. Not right away. She stood before it, heart heavy with the weight of what it meant to be remembered by something that had once been her cage. The mirrors did not rush her. They simply shimmered with quiet honesty, each one holding a version of her that had never quite made it through the same door she had. There was the Clara who had left too early. The Clara who had never come at all. The Clara who stayed too long, trying to fix what refused to heal. None of them looked broken, just paused, like ghosts still waiting for the story to end differently. The air in the room was warm, but not thick. Time slowed around her, not to trap her, but to give her space to choose. For the first time in ages, there was no knock at the door, no stranger trembling on the porch, no child with haunted eyes asking if the house was safe. Just her, and the chair, and the silence she had earned. She finally sat. It was nothing dramatic, no sudden visions, no crashing of memory against bone. Just a sigh, long and quiet, that rose from the floorboards and filled the room like breath. The house exhaled with her, as if it too had been holding its lungs full of her name. From somewhere beyond the mirrors, the child entered the room. Older, somehow. Or maybe Clara had simply become more aware of the vastness inside them. They crossed the room slowly, then sat cross-legged at her feet like they used to when the world still felt like a maze. "I think I'm tired," Clara said. The child nodded. "I don't mean sleepy," she added. "I mean the kind of tired that lives under your ribs, the kind that sleep can't reach." "I know," the child whispered. And they did, because Clara saw it now. The child had never been just one person. They were a piece of everyone who had entered the house. The first soft step into healing, the inner voice given form, the fragment that still believed light was possible. Clara leaned forward, pressing her hands together, watching her own fingers flex in the dimness. "What happens if I stop?" she asked. The child tilted their head. "Stop being the keeper." Clara nodded. "You don't stop," the child said softly. "You change." That word landed differently than it used to. She had once feared change, thought it meant loss. But now change meant permission. It meant she no longer had to hold every burden alone. She looked around the mirror room. Some of the reflections had faded, not in rejection, but in rest. They'd been seen. That was all they wanted. And in their place, the room filled with something new, echoes. Not of pain, but of love. The sound of 100 small kindnesses, a door held open. A word spoken at the right time, a hand reached out in darkness. All of them rising together, layer by layer, until the room felt full of something ancient and gentle and alive. A voice, not hers, not the child's, spoke then. Not out loud, inside. "You made a home from a wound." Clara's chest shuddered, and in doing so, you turned the wound into a door, and the door into a welcome. The chair shifted beneath her, not to throw her out, but to lift her up. Her spine straightened. Her breath deepened. She was still tired, but no longer afraid. Outside the mirror room, the house stirred. A new arrival had come. The lights in the entryway brightened. A breeze slipped through the open window, carrying with it the scent of earth and something familiar. Change. The child stood, holding out their hand. "You don't have to lead anymore," they said, "but you can still walk beside them." Clara smiled, took the hand. Together, they stepped from the mirror room, back into the heart of the house. The walls had shifted again. Not drastically, just enough to make room for one more. Always one more, because the house was no longer haunted, it was held. And it hummed. Not with fear, with echoes of healing. The house had begun whispering again, not the terrified murmur of shifting doors or the echo of old footsteps down forgotten halls, but something warmer. It was subtle. A hum beneath the wood grain, the sound of lives brushing up against each other without breaking. Clara felt it before she heard it. It greeted her in the way the stairs no longer creaked beneath her feet, the way the windows stayed clear, no matter how hard the rain tried to smudge them. The house remembered joy now, not just pain. She stood in the hall with her hand against the wall, fingers splayed, feeling the faint pulse of memory. It was like pressing your palm to the chest of someone sleeping soundly, present, steady, unconcerned. She closed her eyes and listened, not for danger, for story. And it came. 2 floors up, someone laughed. A full, unrestrained laugh that cracked through the quiet like sunlight through broken shutters. In the kitchen, the old kettle sang not because it boiled, but because someone had found a way to fix the melody hidden inside the spout. In the garden, the boy who had once spoken only in murmurs now taught the others how to coax life from the dirt. And they listened. The way only those who'd been buried understood how to. The door, with the fading mark, still lingered at the end of the hall, unchanged in position but stripped of menace. It had become something else. Now, like a sealed book on a shelf you once feared to open but now walked past without flinching. Clara no longer sat across from it. There was no need. Whatever had waited behind it had gone quiet, not in retreat, but in respect. Some things stop knocking when they realize they're no longer the loudest voice in the room. She passed the door and turned into the wing that had once been the coldest. It had transformed. The windows here looked out over the trees, and the trees had begun to lean closer, like even nature wanted in. In one of the smaller rooms, a girl sat on the floor surrounded by journals, her fingertips ink stained, her eyes sharp. She didn't notice Clara watching from the doorway. She was writing feverishly, like the words were dripping from some long, sealed vein. Clara didn't interrupt. She knew that look, the tremble that wasn't fear but release. Back downstairs, the rulebook sat open on the table. The child was there. They looked up with eyes that had seen so much and somehow still held wonder. "Ready for another?" Clara asked. The child grinned. They wrote their first today. She smiled, settled beside them, and looked at the fresh ink pressed into the page. Rule 27. The house doesn't fix you. It just shows you where the cracks let the light in. Clara leaned back, exhaling. "They're getting braver. They're getting ready," the child corrected. For what, neither of them said aloud, but the air knew. The walls did too. This wasn't just a refuge anymore. It was a threshold, a place people entered to pause, to breathe, to cry, to break safely. But more than ever now, they were beginning to leave. Not to run, to live. The girl who had painted ceilings had started packing, not out of rejection, but readiness. Her bag sat at the end of her bed, half zipped, filled with notebooks and old sketches, and a blanket the house had offered the night she'd first arrived, soaked and shivering. She found Clara later, hands jammed into her pockets, mouth tight. "I think it's time," she said. Clara nodded. "You don't think I'm running away?" "No," Clara said. "You're running toward something." The girl blinked hard, then laughed, breath catching in her throat. "It feels weird." It should. Clara didn't walk her to the edge of the property. The house did. It opened the path. Trees leaned away. Birds held their songs. And when the girl turned to wave, the front door didn't close behind her. It stayed open. Because someone else would need it again. Maybe not tonight. Maybe not for years. But it would be there, always. The house remembered, not just pain, not just fear, but departure. The kind that doesn't mean abandonment, but evolution. Inside, Clara returned to the table and flipped to the next blank page. She didn't write a rule. She just let the silence settle for a while. A silence earned. A silence that waited without pressure. Because even in a house filled with ghosts, joy makes room, and memory learns how to sing. It happened on a Tuesday, a quiet one. No thunder overhead, no strange creaks in the walls, no new door at the end of a hallway that hadn't been there before. Just the smell of bread baking in the kitchen, and the steady thrum of someone sweeping the back porch. But Clara knew something was different. Not because anything had changed, but because nothing had. Stillness had always been the language the house used to say, "Pay attention." The child found her near the old record player, where an untouched vinyl had begun to spin on its own. No sound came from the speakers, but the needle traced the grooves in silence, marking the end of a song Clara didn't remember starting. "They're coming," the child said simply. Clara didn't ask who. She didn't need to. She'd felt it in the bones of the floorboards, in the air that had stopped tasting like stories and started tasting like farewell. The boy with the shadow door had begun folding paper cranes. One after another, dozens of them, lining them along the windowsills like sentinels. He said it calmed his hands. No one asked what he would do with them. Maybe they weren't for anything. Maybe they were just proof that something, once felt broken, could still build. The woman who never used to speak now told jokes over breakfast. The teenager who once sobbed behind the mirror door now braided someone else's hair while reading aloud from a book about sea monsters. And the girl who had written Rule 27, she was gone, not missing, gone. Left a note folded neatly into the rule book. Thank you for giving me a place to be someone other than what happened to me. It wasn't the first goodbye, but it felt like the beginning of the last chapter. Clara walked the house that afternoon, fingertips brushing each wall. Every corner, every room, every stair. She paused outside the door with the faded symbol. It hadn't pulsed in weeks. It looked smaller now. Not in size, but in importance. Whatever had once clawed behind it had either fallen asleep or been replaced by something far quieter. She whispered to it, just once you had your chance. The door didn't answer. Outside, dusk crept across the yard. Fireflies blinked lazily in the tall grass, and someone began humming near the porch. The tune meandered, stumbled, picked up again. It was beautiful in the way broken things are when they try anyway. The house no longer shifted the way it used to. It wasn't reacting to trauma. It was settling, becoming what it was always meant to be, not a maze, not a trap, not a test. A home, not forever, but just long enough. In the entryway, the rule book waited, open, ready. Its pages filled with years of grief, healing, anger, hope, names etched in margins, little drawings between the lines. One page smelled like rain. Another had a coffee stain shaped like a question mark. Clara sat down beside it. She held the pen. The child stood at her shoulder, and together they wrote Rule 28. When the house no longer needs you to stay, it will stop asking. That's how you'll know it's time to go. The ink dried slowly. No one else entered the house that night. No knock. No whisper of arrival. Just candlelight and stories and the soft sound of breathing. Clara walked to her room and found her bag already packed. Not by hands, but by time. The house didn't rush her. It never had. It simply let her know. At the threshold, she turned. The child waited in the hall. "You'll be okay?" she asked. They nodded. "You'll write the next one." Another nod, and then, for the first time, they said her name. Not keeper, not guide, just Clara. She closed the door behind her. Not to leave something behind, but to let someone else open it next. Clara didn't go far. Not really. The path out of the house wasn't lined with torches or tears. No dramatic curtain of fog, no final glance over the shoulder with swelling music. She walked through the open gate with a steady step and a full heart, her bag over one shoulder and her fingers brushing the tips of wild grass growing on either side of the trail. Behind her, the house remained exactly as it was, no collapse, no sigh, no flicker. Because this time, her leaving wasn't loss. It was permission. She walked until she couldn't hear the house humming anymore. Then she stopped. Not because she was tired, but because she realized something. She wasn't done. The house had let her go. But her part wasn't over. It had simply changed. The world beyond wasn't cruel, just louder, messier, less kind in the way healing places are kind. But Clara had changed too. Her eyes didn't search for escape routes now. Her back didn't tense when doors clicked shut. She moved through towns like someone who had already lived through the end and come back with a lantern. She never told anyone where she'd come from, not directly. But people knew. The way you know when someone has survived something you can't name. She listened more than she spoke. She asked better questions. She built small rooms with her words, places people could rest inside for a few minutes at a time. In every town she visited, she left behind something. Small, quiet, but real. A note taped to a mirror in a diner restroom. It wasn't your fault. Not even a little. A folded napkin left in a library book with, "You don't need to be perfect to be worth loving." Chalk scrawled on sidewalks before the rain washed it away. Some doors only open when you stop knocking. And sometimes, rarely, she met people who had heard of the house. Not from books, not from stories, just felt it. The way you feel a dream you haven't had yet. One man looked at her after a long silence and whispered, "I think I almost made it there once." Clara smiled and simply said, "You still can." But back in the house, something had changed. The child, no longer just a child, sat at the long table in the entry room. The rule book was open. They didn't write immediately. They waited. Watched. Learned. It wasn't fear. It was respect. The walls didn't need building anymore. They needed tending. The house had grown old not from age, but from stories, and stories must be listened to. New guests came, as always. Different shapes, different weights behind their eyes, but they found the same soft welcome, the same quiet magic. A teenage boy who had forgotten how to speak found a room where the walls responded in color to his thoughts. A woman with a shaking hand found a hallway that only straightened when she walked it. A young man who didn't know who he was anymore discovered a mirror that showed impossibility instead of truth. The child watched them, helped when needed, and wrote, "Rule 29, the house doesn't belong to any one of us. It belongs to the silence between our pain, where things can grow again." Clara never returned to stay, but sometimes, in the stillness of dusk, she'd find herself standing near a crooked tree, just beyond the bend where the path faded. From there, she could see the house, just barely, glowing like a memory that had decided to remain lit. And once, only once, she saw someone on the porch. A young woman, sitting where Clara once had, rule book in her lap. She waved. The woman waved back. Clara smiled, turned, and walked on. She wasn't the keeper anymore. But she had left a house behind that knew how to remember. The house stood quiet beneath the morning light, its silhouette softened by ivy and the slow stretch of years. It didn't need to change anymore. It didn't need to grow taller or twist its halls to fit the wounds of those who entered. It had learned. It had become. And now, it simply waited, not idly, not sadly, but like a hand resting on a table, open, palm up, ready for whoever might need to hold it. Inside, the rooms breathed gently, their walls steeped in memory. Some still held the heat of candles, lit during long nights of confession and reckoning. Others whispered stories through creaking floorboards and quiet laughter buried deep in the beams. But the echoes were warm now. They lingered like perfume on the air after someone beloved has passed through. The rule book sat on the long table in the front hall, its pages weathered but never worn out. The ink had faded in places where tears had smudged it, or where hands had trembled with the act of writing something that needed to exist outside of thought. There were fingerprints along the margins, tiny doodles, dates no one remembered but that the house never forgot. The new keeper, no longer a child, not yet old, sat near the window, watching the trees shift in the breeze. They didn't speak much. They didn't have to. Those who came through the door now arrived already knowing that silence could mean safety. That stillness could mean space. They entered softly, shoulders hunched, eyes scanning, and within a day they began to breathe differently. That was the house's gift in the end, not to fix, to allow. A girl arrived one evening just before the rain. She had no shoes and a bruised jaw, but she carried a blanket balled under her arm like it was armor. She said nothing for 3 days. Then she found the wall in the west corridor where people wrote what they could never say aloud. And she wrote, in tiny, cramped script, "I thought love meant letting myself disappear." The house responded that night by opening a new room, a small sunlit nook with a single chair, a floor-length mirror, and a window that faced east. The girl sat in that room for hours, staring into the mirror, as if daring it to show her something worth staying for. Eventually, it did. Elsewhere, a man who had forgotten how to grieve built a garden behind the house, his hands in the dirt from dawn to dusk. He planted things that didn't grow right, plants that refused sunlight, but he smiled anyway. Because here, they tried, and that was enough. Each story wove itself into the walls. Each breath left a mark, and the house never forgot a single one. One day, a woman with a long braid and the soft eyes of someone who had once been shattered stood in the kitchen with her palm on the wall. She whispered. Did she ever come back? She didn't say Clara's name. She didn't need to. The house answered with a flicker of the light, a brief warmth blooming through the floorboards. Not a yes. Not a no. Just this, she's everywhere now. That night, the rule book was opened again. A new hand wrote. Rule 30, healing isn't the end of the story. It's just where you begin writing your own. The book was closed, the candle extinguished, and the house continued. The next morning, another knock came, gentle, uneven, hopeful. The door opened, and the house, older, wiser, full, welcomed them in. Because it would always have room, not because it was endless, but because it had learned that healing expands when shared, and so it waited, with arms wide, with stories in its walls, with rules still unwritten, and with love that didn't ask for anything in return.